Testing, testing, 1, 2. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, good afternoon, members. Thank you for attending this meeting of the extraordinary meeting of the Joint Finance and Economic and Culture and Leisure Overview and Scrutiny Committees. The first item on the agenda is the election of chairman. Could I therefore ask for any nominations for the position of chairman for this committee, please? Councillor Harrison. Is that seconded, please? Are there any other nominations, please? Okay, can I see all those in favour of Councillor Lee for chairman, please? 1, 2. Lay. Apologies, Councillor Lay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. All those against, please? Any abstentions? That is carried, so Councillor Lay is appointed as chairman for this meeting. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Could I ask for any nominations for vice chairman, please?
Can I please propose Paul Fellows?
Any other nominations, please? Can I see all those in favour then for Councillor Paul Fellows? Those against? Any abstentions? Councillor Fellows, duly elected. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending for this extraordinary meeting to discuss and debate the Deepings Leisure Centre request for a financial contribution. The pack of papers for this meeting are quite vast, and I hope you've had time to read through them. We have had 2 further documents for information provided to us, and I believe you've all got copies of those. The format of the meeting will be as follows, which is a change to the standing order. The public speaker will be given longer to present their report today, which is up to, Graham, is it 30 minutes? 20 minutes. Okay. So do we have any apologies of absence, please?
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillors James Denniston, Lee Steptoe, Ben Green and Matt Bailey. Councillor Phil Gadd is substituting for Councillor Steptoe. Councillor Anna Kelly is substituting for Councillor James Denniston. Councillor Helen Crawford is substituting for Councillor Ben Green. Councillor Graham Gill is substituting for Councillor Matt Bailey, and Councillor Paul Wood is substituting for the SK Coalition Group vacancy. Thank you.
To present apologies for lateness for Councillor Murray Turner. He's working currently in Manchester, so he will be on his way down. We will try to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any disclosure of interests, please? If anybody finds any as we go along, then if they could declare those. Okay, can we go to the report, please, to be presented by Councillors Baxter and Stokes?
Thank you, Chair. Do you mind if I stand up?
Not at all.
And I don't know if that messes up the... Oh, yeah. And do you mind if I give a PowerPoint presentation?
Not at all. Thank you.
Really good. I'm new at this. So, thank you very much. It's taken a long time for us to get here. First of all, I've got to express my gratitude to the officers, and particularly Richard Wiles and Karen Whitfield, for getting us this far. I've got to say that it's been a very robust process. We've had many robust conversations along the way. Robust being another word for argument, I guess.
Oh, wow.
And that's how it should. That's how it should be. But we've got to a point where we've got a report that we agree on generally, and a direction of travel. I need also to say thank you to the community interest group that are here today, represented by Virginia Moran. You know her as Councillor Virginia Moran, but today she is in a personal capacity, or as the chair of the community interest group, and also Martin Riley. The group is bigger than that, I think, but given it's the middle of a working day, they're going to try to field all the questions that you have. I understand that if there are questions which remain unanswered, that they will endeavour to give you a reply before full council on Thursday. So it's my job and Paul Stokes' job to present on behalf of the administration the case in favour of going forward with a refurbishment of the Deepings Leisure Centre. And here it is. Can you all see the board? Yes. So please take a deep breath, because I'm going to try and get the pain out of the way first. We've been on a long journey, many of us, and then some people arrived in May last year, and so might not be fully up to speed with the picture. But in 1974, the Deepings Leisure Centre was first opened by, I think, the Earl of Exeter, who was an Olympic runner in his time, although he was past his time by 1974. In 2018, there was a proposal for a brand new leisure centre, which partly came out of the ongoing discussions between the school and the Academy Trust and the council and the county council, trying to get a lease in place for the whole of the site. And a solution suggested at that point was perhaps it would be easier if we built a brand new leisure centre, and also better. And it would have been if we could have afforded a brand new leisure centre. In 2019, before the election before last, posters were put up saying new leisure centres delivered in Stamford and the Deepings. In 2021, in July, the centre was closed due to a chronic lack of maintenance, partly because when it was announced that there would be a brand new leisure centre, the maintenance was stopped, other than absolutely essential maintenance. And in December that year, SKDC promised a £10 million refurbishment of the Deepings Leisure Centre. In November the following year, councillors withdrew the support for the Deepings Leisure Centre and handed the keys back in the January of 2023. That's how we got to where we are. One of our 4 towns with a leisure centre which is still standing but in a state. So last year a community group was formed, the Deeping Leisure Centre Community Group. In 2023 you will have noticed there was a political change at SKDC, and that is undoubtedly down to the leisure centre. Some of us would be here without the whole leisure centre argument. Some of us would not be. I think it's fair to say that the reason why we have 29 on one side and 27 on the other, and not the other way round, is partly because of a Deeping Leisure Centre. Lincolnshire County Council, who had suddenly been landed with a building which was empty, said, what are we going to do with this? Are we going to refurbish it or demolish it? They don't run leisure centres, so they invited expressions of interest for people to run a leisure centre. They got, I believe, one, but at least one expression of interest. The Deepings Community Interest Company was registered at Companies House in 2023. A business plan has been submitted to SKDC and also to LCC, which you've got today, and we've put part of that in the public domain, the bits that can be put into the public domain. And so your decision today and on Thursday is whether or not the leisure centre will be refurbished and run by a community interest company or demolished. The cost of demolition, I understand, is in the region of £1.5 million. And it's public money whichever way it goes. So the decision for you to make today is to consider the request from the Community Interest Company for a contribution of £850,000 towards the cost, and I believe it's about 40% of the total cost of a refurbished leisure centre. The questions to be asked are: is it desirable? Is it legal? Is it affordable? Is it achievable? Is it value for money? What are the risks? What are the benefits? And Chair, I've printed out those questions in case you want to use them as a kind of guide, because I've been to meetings like this before where it can easily get into a scattergun approach where one person asks a question about the building costs and then somebody else is asking how many swimmers will arrive. I'm hoping these questions will be able to frame your conversation. So going through each of these in turn, is it desirable? I think this is probably the easiest question, because I think regardless of how much it costs, we'd like it. The original community consultation undertaken at the time that this Deepings was promised a £10 million refurbishment, the original community consultation said, yes, definitely we would like to reopen the leisure centre. And you'll see in paragraph 6 of your report that consultation results again say, yes, surprisingly, the people of the Deepings still want a refurbished leisure centre. They still miss the leisure centre. There isn't attached to your report a quality impact assessment. There was when the council closed down the leisure centre, or made the decision to close down the leisure centre, there was an equality impact assessment, and it went through the various criteria of impact on poverty, impact on discrimination, impact on minorities, and so it went through a whole list of things. On every single measure, it had a negative impact. Closing a leisure centre has a negative impact on a community. And by the same token, even though there's no proof of it in your pack, opening a leisure centre has a positive impact on every section of the community. We're in the middle of a health and well-being crisis. We're in the middle of a mental health crisis and obesity crisis. So obviously it's good for people's health and well-being. What's different about the Deepings Leisure Centre is that it is a rectangle of water. It is, to some people, a boring swimming pool. Stamford and Bourne have both got leisure pools with kind of graduations of shallow water into deeper water. But at Stamford, there are only 3 lanes, which are kind of coagulated lanes where you can actually swim up and down in a straight line. And when the swimming pool is open to the public, those straight lines are in the way of everybody else swimming. Stamford, great leisure centre, but doesn't meet the needs of swimmers who just want to do lane swimming and go up and down and up and down. I went to Bannatyne's on a sort of a day pass recently, industrial espionage and all that, and I said, why aren't why aren't competitive swimmers coming here? At Bannatyne's, the pool is not deep enough to do a tumble turn. So if you're interested in being a competitive swimmer, the Deepings Leisure Centre is the only rectangle of water in the south of SK where it would be possible to do a tumble turn, to do competitive swimming properly. And the nearest is Spalding, which is 10 or more miles, 10 or 11 miles away from the Deepings. If you live in Stamford and you want to do competitive swimming, you've either got to find a way into the Stamford endowed schools, or you have to drive 20 miles to get to Spalding. The next slide is it legal? You've got lots of complicated advice from Bevan Britton in front of you. I'm sure you've read it. If you ask any two lawyers about any one subject, you're likely to get differing opinions. I'm sure there are differing opinions on this. The county and the district have gone together to Bevan Britton for an opinion as to whether it is legal to make a grant of this magnitude to a community organisation. The result, as you expect from barristers, is, well, proceed with caution, be careful, you need to make sure you get everything right, but the opinion is it can be done in a legal fashion. It involves publishing notices of what grant has been provided and for what grounds and all kinds of stuff. And I dare say we might have to spend a little bit more on with Bevan Britton to make sure we get the notices right. But in principle, there is no legal obstruction to getting on with this. And I've mentioned Wednesbury reasonable there because it kind of tickles me. It's, without wanting to stereotype lawyers, a decision is Wednesbury reasonable. Sorry, a reasoning or decision is Wednesbury unreasonable or irrational if it is so unreasonable that no reasonable person acting reasonably could have made it. That's different from is it reasonable. Wednesbury reasonable and ordinary reasonable are two different legal categories. But if you think that a reasonable person acting reasonably, any given individual who is reasonable, acting reasonably, then you can go ahead with this. So the law isn't a reason to turn it down. Is it affordable? In 2021, we had an argument, we had a debate in the Mears Leisure Centre about the refurbishment. Did it need to cost £10 million or could it be done for less? And we said at the time, what people in the Deepings were asking for was to fix the roof, because if they'd fixed the roof, then they could muddle on until money was found for Leisure SK or Leisure, the people who run SK Leisure Centres could find the money to do the other maintenance that went on. It is still the roof, which is the primary problem. 3 years without a roof, 3 years with a leaky roof has not made it easier to fix the roof, but fundamentally it is the roof that is the problem. The heating system is 45 years old and was based on an oil-based heating system, and I'm sure that Mr. Riley is going to inform you if you wish to know about the proposed new heating system, which is much greener, much more modern and likely to work. All the quotes based in the business plan, which you've got copies of but the public haven't, they're based on physical quotes from actual contractors. There is scepticism, and we've included the scepticism within the appendices from the SLC consultants. They often say, well, I'll let people make comments about consultants later on. It's possible to go to consultants and say, what do you think of this? And sometimes the question comes back, well, what do you want us to think of it? But please, when you're considering this application, don't compare the running costs of a leisure centre to the running costs of SKDC leisure centres. Because as we saw this morning, some of us, the way that SKDC, or rather the way that Leisure SK have run leisure centres has not been the most, it has not been a model of business acumen frugality and thrift. Am I on the right slide? Yes. Is it sustainable? The business plan is in front of you. It's for you to judge whether or not it's sustainable, but I can tell you that the consultation undertaken by the community group has shown that 1,000 people, more or less, have said that they would take up swim or gym membership. Councillor Moran would have to clarify whether that's they would come along and swim on a regular basis. Oh, I beg your pardon. Miss Moran. Miss Moran can clarify that later on. So there are commitments to swim gym membership. Already, swim schools all over the place are looking for places to go swimming. So all the schools, there are 5 schools in the immediate catchment of the Deepings that currently are either not doing swimming or they're having to book a bus, take half a school day to go out to Stamford or Bourne, do their swimming lesson and then come back. Fun for the kids, but in terms of educational time well spent, possibly not the best. So they would be back in immediately. The Deeping Swim Club would be back in immediately because they are currently going to 4 or 5 different swimming pools, Bourne, Stamford, Bourne Outdoor, Stand Ground, all over the place. They're driving swimmers and the parents are driving swimmers too. That was me until a few months ago. And it's a pain in the backside to do that. So a swimming pool on the Deepings doorstep would be very welcome. So there's a customer ready-made. And the Deeping School, who are expected to use the sports hall as a sports hall and as an exam hall, is an immediate customer. So some of the criticism of the figures has been, how are you going to get these customers from a standing start? And the answer is, because they're literally on the doorstep, even closer than the doorstep in the case of a Deeping school. So there is a revenue stream ready to go day one. And that's before you get to all the people of the Deepings that used to use it. That used to be the second most popular leisure centre in SKDC by footfall, beaten only by the Mears, which is serving a much bigger town. Is it achievable? The key to achieving this plan is the commitment or otherwise of SKDC today and on Thursday. If you say yes, it can happen. If you say no, it's far more difficult for it to ever happen. And I don't want to get melodramatic, but LCC have got contingency plans of demolition in place. They have to deal with this building. Either it opens up or it shuts down, and we are the key. And the caveats within the report, within the recommendations of the report, saying this £850,000 is only going to be handed over if the lease is transferred, if the other funders are confirmed, and so on and so forth. They're in the pack. That is to reduce the risk of this commitment. Is it value for money? The total cost of the refurbishment, I believe, is £2.2 million. So our input of 850,000. Oh, I beg your pardon. So our input of £850,000 actually releases more than double that amount of money for a refurbished leisure centre fit for the future. The remainder of the funding is detailed in the pack, but it includes the County Council, the government in the form of the Community Opportunities Fund, the United Charities, the parish councils and other benefactors. It is possible, and this is a conversation that has gone on along the way in parallel to the conversations with Karen and Richard. We have a Rural England Prosperity Fund and a UK Shared Prosperity Fund. It is possible for the community group to bid to those funds. Whether or not they were eligible was a bone of contention for some time. I'm convinced that they would be eligible for those schemes, and so certain elements of the scheme, were it beyond scope, such as the soft play area, could be a scheme in itself which could be submitted to the REPF or the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, and that's a different set of funding, but it's a conversation for a different day. There are risks. This is not a comprehensive risk assessment, but first of all, the Department for Education, if you get the government involved in anything, and I'm not being political there, if you get any government involved in anything, then it can slow things down, and they ask lots of questions that have already been asked and lots of questions that nobody ever thought to ask. But the freehold transfer of the building, which would be a conversation between the county, the district and the government, which has already been going on for more than a decade, that's a nut to crack. Hopefully this is the catalyst that solves the problem. Secondly, there could be unforeseen building problems. We've got a risk assessment around asbestos, and the asbestos is either contained or removed, or will be removed. But there's RAC that no one had ever heard of before last summer, and now it's a crisis across the country. There are plenty of things that could come along the way, but they are unknown unknowns. And the third risk is that the business plan doesn't work. That everybody who said they would use a centre doesn't. Nobody wants to swim, nobody wants to use a gym, but when you look at places like Bannatynes or other leisure providers are available, even Councillor Selby has a gym membership at a place we heard this morning, and so there are people that are using gyms on a regular basis that may wish to come to the Deepings. Possibly not Councillor Selby, because I'm not sure of the sauna facilities at the Deepings Leisure Centre. I'm getting towards the end. Thank you for your forbearance, Chair. What are the benefits? We meet the objectives of our corporate plan. I don't think anybody is going to argue that we want accessible leisure facilities across the district. This facility complements the busy pools at Bourne and Stamford, and the gyms at Bourne and Stamford. The gym at Stamford, I believe, is 20 stations. 15 stations at Stamford. The gym here, I think, is 60. So it's much bigger than Stamford. This would also restore the council's damaged reputation. And a lot of the people that were involved in the original decision are no longer in the chamber. They've gone on to different things. But the stain, certainly as far as the Deepings is concerned, people still blame the council for them not having a leisure centre available to them. This would put it right. We can all be heroes with this if we all take it forward and enable the thing to happen. Then we are all solving the problem, and people will forget how the problem was caused in the first place because they'll have a leisure centre. And obviously it's meeting the needs and aspirations. The Conservative MP supports it. The Conservative County Council support the plan. The residents of the district support it. But in terms of the benefits, we used to have in the Deepings Leisure Centre a Tang Sudo society, which no one's ever heard of it, unless you've actually heard of it. We had world champion Tang Sudo competitors based at, and you see in the picture you've got all ages there doing martial arts. That's something that used to happen and is now happening somewhere else. There are plenty of other physical activities that are happening in other venues, and also physical activities that are just not taking place because there is no leisure centre accessible and available in the Deepings. The Deeping Swim Club carries on, has managed to struggle on regardless of the pool closing, but not without massive input from the coaches and the parents and the officials of that club. Some of you were good enough to attend the Deepings Rob Wellborn Gala, which took place at the Mears Leisure Centre in Grantham, and I thank you, and that was a cross-party thing. Thank you to everybody that attended that. You can see that people are enthusiastic about swimming, not just in the Deepings, but across the county. And you can't have competitive galas with other clubs if there are no other clubs to compete with. So that was a day when the swim club went to the Olympic pool, and I think that picture shows everything for me, everything. So that's my presentation, Chair. I'll now hand over to Councillor Stokes, if that's okay.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Over to you, Councillor Stokes.
Thank you. May I also offer congratulations to the CIC on presenting a viable business plan towards over the last few months. I think, building on what Councillor Baxter has already said, I think today we have before us a case of if something is not impossible, then there must be a way to do it. Currently, we expect Deeping and the surrounding residents generally to travel 12 miles each way to Bourne, 12 miles each way to Stamford, or 12 miles each way to either Spalding or Peterborough, on an average. That's not very good for the environment. Do we really want our residents travelling outside the district to stay healthy? Leisure Opportunities, a national magazine, has recently produced a paper discussing affordable models of leisure provision, particularly in smaller locations and rural areas, recognising that these places need help with the rise of obesity, lifestyle diseases and mental illness, as well as general fitness. 10.5 million people, 20% of the UK population, currently live in rural areas, such as the Deeping, and the need for leisure provision is paramount. Greenwich Leisure, another leading leisure provider, is currently exploring many models to address this challenge. I think the Deeping proposal includes compact, cost-effective and easy-to-operate multi-activity spaces. They are working with community groups to develop blended management models that combine leisure expertise with trained and committed volunteers. The combination with the school is paramount and is an additional benefit. Wadebridge Leisure Centre in Cornwall is run by a CIC called FOWLC. If anybody hasn't seen that, please have a look. They are outstanding and add to the fact that we are coming past the COVID scenario. They've doubled their adult memberships in 2 years and children in swimming lessons as well. Their sports hall has seen new teams and clubs formed. This is something that could easily be achieved in the Deeping, in my personal opinion. Personal accounts on the report, just a few points. I think there are comments in terms of business migration with Leisure SK. Well, we've had a look at that this morning, and I think Leisure SK clearly need to up its game in terms of marketing, and it should be able to cope with market disruption from a volatile newcomer, such as the CICTC. A leisure centre in Deepings brings the visitor economy from South Holland and Peterborough. There are significant benefits towards Deeping. There are many comments from the consultant, SLC, on various aspects of the leisure performance. I don't believe they altogether take account of a rural area and are based on national-centric data. Similarly, the observations on construction costs, they don't seem to take account of the opportunities for local purchasing, local sponsors, direct purchasing, and are not so relevant. They're more relevant to national statistics rather than the East Midlands. Meeting the community where they are is a mantra of this particular project before us. Delivery branding, personas that truly reflect the philosophy of helping people live well and feel great across their district. I think there's many benefits of what we've got before us.
Thank you, Councillor Stokes. At this point, can I just tell you that there is an amendment to point 1.38 on page 12 of the report. Jeremy Barlow, who is the Building Control Manager, has stated this paragraph needs to be disregarded. If you need to know the detail of the reason behind this, then Karen Whitfield could give you the detail. It's page 12 and it's point 1.38. Have you found it? Karen will just give you a little bit of detail about that, if that's okay. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to clarify, members, Jeremy Barlow has reconsidered this advice. The advice would be would stand should there be no heating at all within the building and a heating element be introduced. But as a change of heating status, it is not necessary to bring the whole of the building up to current building standards. So He has asked for that comment to be disregarded, which is the whole of paragraph 1.38. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. We're now going to go in public speaking with Ms Moran to actually explain to us the details of the report. Once she has finished her report, then questions can be given to Councillor Moran at that time. Sorry, Miss Moran. And then, once all those questions are complete, we will ask her to leave the chamber. Can I just let you know that if you have any questions that are on the pink papers, then we really need to wait until we go into private session for those questions, please. So it's over to you, Ms Moran, and you have 20 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present this request for funding towards the renovation and reopening of the Deepings Leisure Centre, and for your time to give it your consideration. I've been an SKDC councillor for Market and West Deeping for the past 5 years, but today I'm addressing you in my role as a director of the Deepings Community Leisure Centre, CIC. We really need a snappier title than that. I have with me Martin Riley, who is another director of the CIC, and he has responsibility for the refurbishment programme. I'm sorry there aren't more members of the CIC here, but sadly they all work full time and they're saving themselves for Thursday. I've got quite a bit to say, but I know you're all keen to ask your questions, so just bear with me. I don't intend to go through the years-long history. Ashley has already covered that, and it's well documented. This request is looking for this council's support to reinstate leisure facilities to thousands of residents in the Deepings and beyond. Facilities that they have enjoyed for almost 50 years, and which will bring parity with the other 3 towns of South Kesteven. Throughout our previous battles to retain the facilities, we have had the unending support of residents. Sorry. Damn it. And this has never wavered. The Deepings is truly the least supported area within SKDC, and we have watched over the years as one service or facility after another has been taken away. We have no arts centre, no large events venue. Our community centre is run by volunteers. We now run our own immensely successful library with volunteers. We looked after ourselves in the pandemic through volunteers. We recently updated a miserable little SKDC play park again with money raised by volunteers. And so it goes on. We now wish to be given the means to run our leisure centre with volunteers on a not-for-profit basis. I'd now like to comment on various aspects of the documents before you. Our business plan gives you an outline of the services we hope to provide, the repairs required and the funding sources for those repairs. I will say that to date, the support we've received from Lincolnshire County Council has been really very much appreciated. At the closure and handing back of the centre to them by SKDC, they could have simply torn the building down and handed the land to the school. They didn't, nor did they want to. In addition to giving us the opportunity to buy the land and buildings, they have also offered us considerable financial support towards those repairs. Their stipulations were that the amount of that offer were kept confidential, and we have done our utmost to ensure that that was adhered to. This is why I asked that the business plan be put on pink papers, and we would be grateful if that confidentiality was adhered to by those of you attending today. LCC also stipulated that we employed a professional leisure company to run the centre for us, and that we accommodate the school's requirements for use of the sports hall. We were happy to comply with both of these, as they were our intentions in any event. We are also very grateful to Sir John Hayes, who we have met on several occasions, our local MP, for his consistent support and encouragement. The plan also includes the costs of renovation. These are dramatically different to those provided to SKDC in the past, and there's several reasons for this. The first one is that the figures provided to SKDC were based on a formula, which meant that each item of expenditure was based on the square meterage of the footprint of the building. That method is patently flawed, so any comparison with those figures is a nonsense. We have provided written quotations from local suppliers which show exactly what the cost of each item is. The second reason our costings are so low is that we have the benefit of several of the companies doing large items of work, such as the roof, the electrical work, and the new heating, solar and ventilation systems are being done at cost. We also benefit from various professional services which are being provided free of charge. This includes our architect, our solicitor and our barrister. Please don't think for 1 second that this will mean an inferior quality of work. Quite the reverse. These are local, well-qualified companies who want this centre open again, for their own benefit, for their children and their grandchildren's benefit, and for the community as a whole. This is how Deeping people operate. SKDC officers appear to have taken the view that because our prices are low, that we won't be complying with building regulations or have the required insurance or comply with health and safety requirements. I have no idea why they would think that. Why would we not be providing the best possible facilities for ourselves and our families? There is also mention in the report that we'll not be providing a full refurbishment. No room in that centre will remain untouched. There has been mention in meetings that we have no budget for exterior upgrading. We have the costs, we haven't included them. Because, to be perfectly honest, our customers really don't mind if the cladding's a bit rusty and we aren't covered in fancy logos. What concerns them and what interests them is the facilities inside the building. Doesn't mean we won't do it in the future, but for now we're concentrating on providing the services that they need. Moving on. In the past, due to the agreement between SKDC and the Anthem Trust, the Deepings Leisure Centre has never been able to reach its full potential. The old agreement gave the school the vast majority of pool use during the day in term time, which resulted in a lack of public and club use. The residents of Deeping frequently bemoaned the fact that the pool would be empty for hours on end. The school simply didn't need the amount of hours it was allocated. And whilst the school often offered time back to SKDC, SKDC were unable to accept those hours as they were outside the published times and were often at very short notice. We have met with the Trust on numerous occasions during the year and they no longer require any pool time on a permanent basis. If they do, then this would be booked on an ad hoc basis through the normal channels. They have asked for daytime use of around 38 weeks. It seems to be a moving figure. Every meeting we have, it's 38 or 39 or 41. So, but they'll require the sports hall, which is for PE and for examinations. And we are happy to accommodate whatever they require, because this benefits our children. So they can have it for whatever hours they want. We knew that. That's part of the reason why we want to get the centre open again. They're currently in a temporary building, a sort of blow-up thing that they have to heat, and I can't imagine what it's costing them. But as I say, we're in discussions with them. They can use the sports hall, let us know what they want, They can also have it for special events if they want to do something of an evening, and that will be at a discounted rate. Depending on the results of this meeting and the one on Thursday, we've got an appointment to meet them again at the end of the month, where we'll be able to finalise the hours required. We'll also be finalising our car park requirements, joint access to the site, and the breakdown of any repair costs to that joint access. Finally, on the business plan, I'd like to tell you where we're up to with funding sources. At present, we require just short of 2 million to complete all the works. However, this includes a contingency of almost £500,000. The contingency is there to cover any items which we become aware of. Although the asbestos in the building is currently contained, it may be that we decide it's preferable to remove it. So we've got a figure in for that. Should we need to provide additional cladding to comply with insulation, then that will come from this contingency as well. Having said that, I've just had the news that that is not relevant now, the possible additional cladding. Minor items such as relining our area of the car park, that comes in the contingency. So we have today's request for 850 from this council. LCC have obviously indicated that they would be prepared to contribute, and we have a community ownership fund bid which is currently at around 450,000, but that's a movable figure which will be decided on with the consultant. We're part way there on COF because we have this consultant in place. They require a couple of reports. They want a report from an outside source to just check that we're doing all the repairs that are actually required, and they're providing us with the money to pay for this report. So that's where we are with the Community Ownership Fund. We also have a commitment from various parish councils. We're working our way through them. I'm supposed to be going to one tonight, but as they've been cut off from the rest of the world due to floods for the past week, I think they've got other things to talk about, so I've postponed that one. And we've already had commitment from several councils, including one that's actually in Peterborough, because they recognise that their residents, although they're over the river and in Peterborough, that the residents will benefit from the Deepings reopening again. We also have a lot of plans for crowdfunding. We've had inquiries about business sponsorship, but at present it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, in that more or less the first question on all grant applications is, do you own the building? And we don't. And we can't go out to crowdfunding when all we have is a dream. You can't sell a dream. So really, any approval today at this committee, if it is an approval and it's followed by an approval at full council, that will be the first domino, and that will kick off all our other fundraising. Some of you might be wondering why we're asking SKDC to contribute a larger amount than we expect to receive from LCC. This is purely and simply due to the appalling state that the leisure centre was handed over in. At the time of closure, all councillors had an opportunity to visit the centre, and many of them did. It looked at that time exactly the same as it had for years. Dated? Yes. Grubby and old-fashioned? Yes. Functional? Also yes. When we came to view the building again, immediately after the handover, we were almost speechless. There wasn't a single room that hadn't suffered what can only be described as wanton vandalism. And we hadn't had any vandals in there. Ceilings have been ripped down, there have been holes punched in the walls, wiring ripped out, custom-made stainless steel pool steps have been removed and sent for scrap. It was absolutely heartbreaking. Large receptacles have been placed where the worst of the water ingress was, and the one that was on the first floor, which we estimated contained, was it 10 tonnes?
About 10 tonnes.
Yeah. Contained about 10 tonnes of water, had been left upstairs unemptied. The staff at LCC were appalled and stated they had never had a building handed back to them in such a dreadful condition. It seemed to us it was almost as if someone was determined to make the centre appear impossible to reopen. Happily, we've retrieved the custom-made steps from the scrap man. We had the water emptied straight away, and we've added a plasterer to our costs. Moving on to more pleasant things, within your papers is also our Dear Councillor booklet. We actually prepared this prior to the decision not to pursue a new leisure centre. It was our way of letting councillors at the time know how this was impacting residents, as they had been denied a voice at various meetings, including one in Grantham where no one was allowed to speak in the public session. I asked residents to write to me outlining the impact of the loss of leisure facilities would have on them, and the booklet contains a selection from the enormous amount of replies I received. I'd now like to move on to the officer's report. I'm nearly there. If you're starting to glaze over, page left. We actually find it bizarre that they've gone to such great lengths to insist that the monies we've asked for are a subsidy. Yet by their own admission, Leisure SK receive a subsidy. SKDC has also provided what amounts to a subsidy to various outside companies in the past. I can remember years ago tens of thousands being given to a particular dance group in Grantham. We didn't go through all this routine with them, they just gave them the money. As has been alluded to by others, there's been a subsidy paid to a particular football club in Grantham for years and years. Were any of these other subsidies treated as a subsidy? Not to my knowledge. SKDC doesn't have one single entry on the government subsidy list. By their own admission, at items 1.21 and 122, this councillor has the power to provide these monies as a grant. At 1.23, it states that the council should, quite rightly, balance the risks against the potential rewards. Almost no account of the potential rewards of providing a grant. Sorry?
3 minutes left. Sorry.
Okay. Almost no account of the potential rewards of providing a grant of this amount and for this purpose has been mentioned. Thousands of residents will receive enormous, real mental and physical benefits from this proposal. Our mantra of providing facilities for all, especially those with mental and physical difficulties, has simply not been acknowledged. Great store has been placed in the SLC report. I think we're all aware that, particularly in business, consultants tell you what you want to hear. I'm convinced that if we, the CIC, had gone to SLC for a report in support of this proposal, they would have waxed lyrical for page after page about its benefits, just as they did when SKDC were going to spend 10 million on a leisure centre. If you tell a consultant, however obscurely, that you have concerns about the viability of a project, they will provide you with the evidence to support those concerns. Constant comparisons with Leisure SK have been made. Why are we being compared to a company which has failed for the entirety of its existence and continues to do so? A company which officers are actively looking to close and replace? Why not compare us with any of the successful leisure centres that all of our proposed partners run? Spalding has recently received £20 million to build a new leisure centre. Would they really have been given £20 million to create a money pit? I don't think so. Very many of the leisure centres around the country are run well and at a profit year in, year out. Please allow the Deepings to be one of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's obviously a very emotive subject for you. No apologies required. It's really interesting to hear all that detail. We will go into questions now of Ms Moran and Mr Riley, if necessary. And if once they've left the chamber and we find that during debate we have any more questions we need to ask of them, then we would bring them back in to answer those questions for us to allow the debate to carry on. So we're now open to questions if you wish. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking through the implications, 1.3, questions raised about the immediate and positive response. Having seen firsthand at the gala where the Deepings Leisure Centre were able to, for a whole weekend, to fill the Mears Leisure Centre and some, so much so that people were actually having to wait outside at the time when I got there. Is there any reason you can see that this support shown by the Deepings Swimming Club to a leisure centre that was almost 30 miles away will not be replicated in the leisure centre that's on your doorstep?
Thanks, Councillor Harrison. No, the swim club are desperate to get back to the Deepings. They would come back in a heartbeat. They'll be at the front of the queue because they usually have their lessons about 6 a.m. So the first day we open, they probably will be the first customers we have. I too went to the Grantham Mears. Not that I could get a cup of coffee because nobody was in the cafe, even though it was. And you had a job on to get a seat. But that's what it's like with James Wellborn. He's, for those that don't know, he's a Paralympic swimmer that was trained at the Deepings, hence we gave him his name to it. So yeah, the local schools have also been in touch with us and said at the moment we're doing perhaps 1 year, we're doing the absolute minimum, but if you come back and they sent letters to us saying, can we have, 3 years and there'll be 30 kids and blah 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 and this, that and the other, because what's happening at the moment, if they're having to go to say Bourne, what they do is they take 2 classes with them, and 1 class has a lesson at the side of the pool on whatever subject, reading, writing, arithmetic, whatever, while 1 class is in the pool, and then they swap over. Well, that's ridiculous. And it's something, if they want to carry on doing that, we'll accommodate them, but they won't be on the side of the pool. We'll give them a room to do it in. But I'm quite looking forward to this, driving through town and seeing a little trail of kids walking off down to the leisure centre, or with the little backpacks on with the stuff, which doesn't happen now, unfortunately.
Councillor Fellows.
Hello, Miss Moran. First of all, can I congratulate the CIC on the hard work you've done? It is inestimable, the hours and the hard work you've put in. It is totally to be recognised and congratulated. But I do have a few concerns. One, I'd be happy if you could answer. How far have you actually got with the transfer of the lease? Because I think that is fundamental to progress of where you're at. And as a supplementary, if you don't mind, do you as a group feel that you have pushed the Anthem Trust enough on the amount of contribution they should make going forwards? Because their use of your leisure centre, should it become that, is quite huge.
Right. There isn't going to be any lease. There won't be any lease between ourselves and Lincolnshire. There won't be a lease with the school. It's just a transfer of the freehold?
That's what I meant. I do apologise. Has the freehold been transferred, or are you waiting for it? Where are you with that? Yeah. My apologies. I got the wrong word. How are you with the transfer of the freehold?
I'm just waiting for heads of agreement, but obviously that's another chicken and egg thing. Until we get a promise of the money to repair it, we can't go ahead with the transfer. But I've built up a very good relationship with the senior people at LCC, and while all this is being decided, we've been looking into the various things they need from us and what we need from them. So I'm expecting some heads of agreement on the transfer imminently, really. Your second question was how hard would we push the school? It's not that kind of relationship, really. It's a very mutual relationship because they want us and we want them. They have paid a very small fee in the past when SKDC was running the centre, and one of the first things they said at our first meetings were they aware that they've been getting away with blue murder as regards paying for the amount of usage that they had, and they were well aware that they were going to have to look at a commercial rate for having the amount of sports hall time that they had. What we've done is we've looked at renting out the space at only what it costs us to keep that building going, because so we're not running the sports hall on a sort of profit basis for the school. Any profit we get from the sports hall will come from outside organisations, like there's a Paralympic team that want to come and use it on a regular basis. There's martial arts people, there's badminton clubs that want to come, all these sort of people where we'll make the money on the whole. Because our view is, as regards the school, every pound that we charge the school in profit is a pound taken away from our educational supplies for our children. And that's not what we want, so why would we do that? So we started off quite high, but we'll come down. And the school has started out quite low, but they'll move up. But it's a mutual thing, really, because we'll be using the same entrance and exit, and we've given them quite a lot of car parking space back, which they thought they were going to lose. So we're playing cards at the moment. But it'll all come out in the end and we'll all be happy and we'll work together.
Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Councillor Moran, thank you for your presentation. You've obviously done a lot of hard work on it. I just wanted to make sure it's well-founded. You actually said, and I probably agree with you, said it was the leisure centre was in an appalling state. It was a disgusting state, it was an appalling state. And I find that difficult then to equate that to the fact that you're only saying refurbishment costs will be 2.2 million. Now, I don't know whether you know, but I'm a retired chartered quantity surveyor, and previous to my role as a councillor, I did work for SKDC, and I was in charge of the construction of Grantham Mears Leisure Centre. I know that's a different thing, but my background was in construction and costs. And it just seems to me, I find it difficult to accept. It's an appalling state, but you've only allowed 2.2 million. And I know it's a refurbishment rather than a new construction, so I'm not trying to say it's going to be a new construction. But if you're going to do it, you're going to want a reasonable amount of money. That does not seem enough to substantiate be able to come up with a satisfactory building. Now, I know you're confident you are, and local people and all that. And I know Paul Stokes has also said you'll get local people involved. That only goes so far, though. And obviously there's hidden costs. I appreciate you've said you've got a contingency built into it, but I just cast doubts on 2.2 million does not seem anything like enough for it. Also, my other question is, you formed this company, Deepings Community Leisure Centre, CIC, but what is your commitment to that company? This is like a voluntary company. Am I right in saying your liability is only £1 each? That, to me, doesn't sound a very good commitment to put out to the public or generally to us. that you're well committed to it. Is that because you only had to put £1 into form it, I presume? I don't know whether you've got any answers to those two points I've made. The refurbishment costs, which I can't contemplate that that's enough, and the fact your commitment to this company and what liability you've got. Thank you.
Right. As regards the appalling state, it's actually minimal when you come to look at it. It's very little work involved in undoing what was done. But it's just, we were so taken aback because to suddenly see ceilings down in areas where water hadn't run through and holes in walls. But at the end of the day, it's all decorative, really, the damage that was done. And I mean, a lot of the rooms, if it wasn't for the fact that the lights weren't on, there's nothing wrong with them that a good clean and decorating won't put right. There's new flooring going in everywhere, there's new lighting going in everywhere, there's new ceilings going in everywhere. I'll pass you on to Martin in a second about the costs. You're doubting our commitment because we've only paid £1.
I'm not doubting your commitment, Councillor Moran. I think you are committed to it. I've no doubt about that. I'm doubting the practicalities of achieving it, and also the position that you present by only committing £1 to it anyway.
Right, so if I'd put 50 grand in it, you'd think I was committed. But because it's only cost me £1, which actually I still owe, for anybody, I haven't actually paid it. No, you haven't paid yours either.
I'm the one that paid all out.
Oh no, you paid them all, didn't you? Yeah. I don't know how to justify my commitment. I was blonde when all this started, if that's a hint.
And by that I mean, how committed is the group and the council, because I realise this is a two-way thing, to the site, to the concept of private funding? There's a very strong business plan, so surely then that would be a business plan that would appeal to private investors as well. By that I mean banks as well as the individual investors. You've also got the question about how the centre is set up. You look at what's coming in Newark, you look at what's coming in Spalding in terms of very big grants that are funding some of those centres. And then you've got the private option. So Choice is formerly known as Oceans Leisure Centre in Grantham. That's about £35 for membership. That has a pool. That's a totally private facility. It's obviously making money. So there are alternatives there. And I appreciate that this is partly more towards Councillor Baxter, but I do think that the community group, I think, must have considered these things as well. And that's the reason why I'm asking while you're still here. What alternatives you've looked at, and why is it that what you're putting forward to us today is what you've concluded is the best option compared to the alternatives?
Apparently I've got to answer this one. I think the situation, certainly post-COVID in the commercial world, is that hospitality and leisure is a pariah when it comes to the banks. We did make some conversations with private funds, but the simple answer to that is that there is almost nobody touching hospitality and leisure and putting into that the entire sector, not purely leisure centres. And a little bit like your SLC consultants look on a national basis, they almost won't even look on a case-by-case basis, no matter how strong the viability of a potential business case is. They duck away from it. In terms of getting the centre up and running again and what other options there are for the community, I don't think there are any. The council itself in the past has explored other sites for a leisure centre and basically ran out of ideas on that one. So this, and you know, how green is it to just abandon a building that structurally is perfectly okay and you can use again to build another building elsewhere? I think from that point of view, it wouldn't make any kind of environmental or ecological sense to do that. So when we thought about what was the best option for the Deepings, and I have to confess I'm new to the Deepings, I only moved there 1 month before the COVID pandemic started. I used to live in Deeping St Nicholas. When we look at what's best for the Deepings, would you want to start building brand new leisure centres, getting private investors in to build brand new leisure centres, when you've got a really, really good, strong, solid building that just needs refurbishing inside? I'm not sure if that answers your question or whether the supplementary questions come from that, but from our point of view, there is only one real viable option, which is to use a really, really, really good building that needs refurbishing. Apologies, probably the most important part of your question was, would we use money for repairs to actually put into cash flow for the business or what have you? No, because we'll have a delivery partner, a company that will be running the leisure centre on behalf of the CIC. So the CIC won't be involved in the actual day-to-day operation of the site. It will, when we're in negotiations with 2 or 3 regional stroke national operators that have experience of operating leisure and former council provisions on a local or national basis.
Councillor Knight, beg your pardon, because you asked the question and said that it might be directed to Councillor Baxter, could you answer that question now, please, Councillor Baxter?
Yes, I mean, I certainly welcome the question. Sorry, do you want to go ahead? What would be the alternatives? We could, the county council, when they put out the expressions of interest bid, because they realised they've either got to knock it down or they've got to find someone to run it, they went out to the open market and said, who would like to run this opportunity? So everyone, business, the private sector, the public sector, had the opportunity to bid for it. I would think that some people would be put off by the context of the site, because they would look at it and think, a comprehensive school, a leisure centre, competition over a car park, rusty cladding on the outside of the building, that looks difficult. We, SKDC, have previously looked at new build sites. We looked at new build sites on the school field. My favourite was not a new build, actually. It was a factory that's on the edge of the Deepings, which, if we'd bought it at the time we were talking about it, would have been, I think, either £3 or £5 million. We missed it. We didn't buy it. We didn't convert it to a leisure centre. That building is now on for £8 million. So with what we would have made by buying that building and selling it on, we could have funded the leisure centre. But that's ancient history. It's possible that Leisure SK could have seen the Deepings Leisure Centre opportunity, the LCC expression of interest. Leisure SK could have looked at that and thought, actually, we're running 3 leisure centres. It would complement, it would put us back to where we were in terms of the number of leisure centres. They clearly decided not to put in a bid, perhaps because of the struggles they're having with the other 3 centres. So LCC, in looking for a partner or an expression of interest to run the centre, alighted on the community interest company. So as a council looking to provide leisure facilities in the Deepings, I think we can confidently say that buying the land and the construction costs of a new build project like the lorry park / depot is a complicated and unaffordable. Sorry, I'm not saying the depot is unaffordable. That's a different conversation entirely. But the concept of building a brand new leisure centre on a new build site is unaffordable for leisure in the Deepings, and for us to re-engage with that site as Leisure SK or an in-house prospect, that it just wouldn't fly, would it? Let's face it. Based on the conversation we had this morning, that wouldn't fly. So I think working with a community partner, this is a really good test of, can a leisure centre in SKDC be effectively run by a community organisation. Let's face it, in the months and years to come, it might be that other leisure centres in the district are looking for other models of delivery beside Leisure SK or an in-house provision. So a community ownership model is something that it's good to explore. Here's an ideal way to find out to the extent to which it can work. I think it will work, and I think it's a model that could be rolled out across the district, but not yet. Let's make sure this one works before we go any further. If you've got any other ideas for how it could be delivered, I'm all ears, really.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. I have 3 people waiting to speak who actually are not on the committee today, but Councillor Gill would also like to speak. So I'm going to go for Councillor Gill first, please, and then it will be Councillor Morgan, Councillor Kelly and Councillor Selby. I haven't forgotten any of you, okay?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Well, can I add my words to commend the work that's been done by the community here? I remember when myself and others formed a community group to rescue the Grantham Museum next door, and it was an enormous amount of work. I can only imagine how much more work it is to talk about a leisure centre. It is really humbling to see a community come together. There's a lot of emotion on this, but nevertheless, I do have a series of questions, and as I say, I hope that these can help demonstrate the work that you've done on this. I'm trying to organise my questions so that the ones that are relevant for the community group first and the officers second. Firstly, I mean, obviously somebody has to go first. I mean, you referenced earlier on in your conversation that a lot of people are saying, do you own the building? You don't own the building yet, but you're looking forward to having that with LCC. We've had to go first, that's fine. But surely you must be coming today expecting there to be conditions on this, and that whatever happens on Thursday, you accept that there will be requirements placed on any condition of funding from ourselves, and that I just wanted to understand what you feel they are. Now, I do actually have other questions, but perhaps if we just take them one at a time. Is that okay, Madam Chairman? Thank you.
Yeah, we absolutely expect conditions. We expect Lincolnshire to be keeping an eye on us. We expect SKDC to be keeping an eye on us. Yeah, but all I can say is we're going to do what we say we're going to do. We're going to spend the money on what we say we're going to spend it on. Going forward, our annual accounts, for instance, will be published on our website when we've got one, which we haven't got because, yeah, it's one of the dominoes down there. Yeah, and we will always be open and transparent with our residents. If residents want to say what's happening with this, what's happening with that, ask us. We'll tell you. There's no reason for us to, you know. And it's not like at the end of this week, if all goes according to plan, we're going to expect a cheque being written. We're not. We're not expecting that at all. Obviously, we're not going to ask for the grant if the legal process on the building falls down. We're not going to ask anybody for anything if anything happens, but once the deed is done and once we've got the building, that's when we'll be asking everybody for the money. That's when we'll be asking the parish councils to stump up what they've promised and everybody else who's promised money. And that's when we instruct the roofer as well, who's on a month's notice.
Okay, I'm sort of glad to hear that. You mentioned LCC, you mentioned the legal process, you mentioned the Department of Education. Can I also suggest that also with reference to Councillor Martin Hill's letter of referring to the transfer of the title of the building from LCC, he stated that one of the key conditions from the county council was that if for whatever reason the the Deepings Leisure Centre were to fail, let's say that everything went on track, and then, I don't know, COVID comes back in 2028, and for no fault of your own, it failed simply because the leisure industry had to close for 6 months. The LCC didn't want a derelict site within one of their schools, and therefore there ought to be business failure insurance. Just making a few progress with my questions. I presume you've looked into business failure insurance and you acknowledge and accept that you would have to be providing business failure insurance to this council and to all parties that specified a full demolition and a clean exit of the Deepings Community Interest Company if the worst were to happen, and even through no fault of your own that were to fail. Moving on from that, as I would like a comment on that. You say in your business plan that you're hoping for an August opening. I've got to say, I must be said, that looked extremely aggressive to me. I'd like you to comment upon what you think you can achieve between now and August, and whether that's something that you're willing to move on, perhaps even between now and Thursday, because an August opening strikes me, frankly, as very aggressive. I know that a nimble community interest company can move quicker than perhaps public sector, but being able to open that in August may look unrealistic to me. Just a couple of other things as well. I'm referencing Phil Knowles' comments about going back to quantity surveyors and things. Or was that Pam Bird's comment? Pam Bird's comment about full information. It said in the report about the air source heat pump, and the Mears Leisure Centre was quoted approximately 40 times what you're projecting into your numbers. Now, I do appreciate that Mears is significantly larger, nearly twice the size, but that's such a big difference that we really need to understand that. Forgive my ignorance on that, I know nothing about air source heat pumps, but 40 times is such a big difference that perhaps the Mears is high, but we would need to understand that. I just want to make a couple bit more progress as well. The roof inspection document is 3 years old. Are you expecting more deterioration has that been updated since that? Because that's a 3-year-old document. Is that a roofing? I presume you're expecting that to have been in a worse condition the condition of that to have worsened in 3 years, or if not, then that's great. Also on building control, I didn't see too much evidence in this of consultation with building control inspectors. Have you done a pre-application inspection, and would there be a budget for building control? As I say, I mean, it's my experience with the community group over here is that the challenges with the museum, with rescuing the museum, are pale into insignificance with a building that is sort of over 3,000 metres, and I'd want to understand what work you've done on that. And just finally, the point about I really recommend or welcome the support in the community. The community's really come behind you here. Have you thought about generating pre-sales? I mean, I know that I was speaking to Councillor Bisnoutsing, who did some community work in Stamford, where he managed to get over £20,000 out of the local community before he even spoke to local public sector funders, which is a remarkable achievement from Councillor Bisnoutsing in Stamford. I wonder whether some of this support could be monetised to kind of evidence that. Perhaps if you comment on those questions first, thank you.
Quite a few questions there, Councillor Gill. Can you remember all the questions? Or?
We've been writing it down, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to deal with the last one first, if that's all right, because everything else is for Martin. We have got a fundraising committee who have come up with every idea you can possibly think of to raise additional funds, and some that you've never heard of. Pre-sales is one of them. We've got schemes for, there's obviously crowdfunding. We've also got quite a detailed plan which we're going to offer to local businesses, which is for them to sponsor a room. So a particular studio might be called Devonport's, just to pluck one out of the air that isn't on the high street. And it might become the Devonport studio. And they will have paid for the flooring, the new lighting, the redecoration, and any equipment in that room. It may be that we've got a company that wants to sponsor the gym. It may be that more than one of our prospective partners have said, as a sort of sweetener to the deal coming in with us, they would provide all the gym equipment. So that's a nice 6 figures that's taken off our costs. So I don't think there's any schemes that haven't been thought of, but we did a little bit of fundraising last year, purely because our 2 big summer events were coming up in the Deepins, and we thought we really had to. And we made loads of money, absolutely loads, doing very little. But there was people saying, well, what if you don't get it, what happens to the money? And we recognised that people were actually, they didn't know what they were paying for if it didn't come off. I mean, not that it matters to this council, but we did say to them where the money was going to go that we'd raised, and it will go back into the community if we don't move forward. So yeah, we're full of ideas, but I'll pass you on to Martin here. He can deal with all the business stuff, repair stuff.
Okay, so thank you for the 6 questions, and I'm sure some more. Starting off with the business failure insurance, the disaster scenario of the leisure centre needing to close. There's a couple of issues on that are worth bearing in mind. Firstly, one of the rules for CIC is that you have to nominate an asset-locked company, an asset-locked organisation to take over its assets in the event of the business failing. And then the CIC regulator decides what ultimately happens to that asset. So that's something that we're in negotiation with. Now, that asset-locked company has to be a charity or similar. It can be a housing association, but that's an unlikely source of us going into any agreement with them. Strangely enough, we can nominate anyone we want, and we don't even have to tell them we've done it, a little bit like a bequest in a will. So I'm just trying to work out if there's any charities I don't particularly like out there that we would put in it. But seriously, our brokers are also looking at how you would indemnify us should there be a need to knock the building down. But bear in mind, if the building is refurbished to strong standards, then you're not talking about a building that would need demolishing. You're talking about a building that the CIC regulator would choose another company to own, and still the liability would not fall back to LCC. So it's a different scenario to a normal limited company because of this rule of asset locking that you have to consider. August opening, yeah. That would be a stretch, I have to confess right now, but it was originally said an August opening when I think this meeting was due to happen last November time. The plan would always be to make sure that the sports hall, swimming pool and gym would be open first, and that would still be the case, but clearly the first thing that needs to happen is the roof needs to be replaced, which I'm going to skip a question and go to the roof inspection report for you. Yeah, the roof inspection report is quite old. The structural integrity of the roof at the time the report was done said that the roof structure was okay. The type of roof we're proposing putting on actually avoids the structure of the roof, and it's actually a lightweight steel roof, so it's not a like-for-like replacement. We're not going straight back and trying to put layer after layer on top of the existing structure. It will be around 20% of the weight of the existing roof, even with solar panels on it. I'll come back to the air source heat pump bit now. There's a little bit of a misnomer in it, in that they're not all air source heat pumps. The only thing that would be defined in an air source heat pump is what's generating the heat for the swimming pool and what's generating the heat for the hot water supply. The rest are actually what's probably currently cooling this building at the moment, which is an air conditioning stroke heat pump system. So they take heat out the outside air and blow warm air into the spaces that they're heating. They're a lot cheaper, an awful lot cheaper than converting external air into hot water, for that hot water to flow around a giant building and then come back and stick out in different areas and get converted back to warm air in the various spaces. That's why the pricing is so different. It's like, as I said earlier, it's the difference between a like district heating system and putting a central heating system in every house. You wouldn't even consider a district heating system in today's market, so why would you do that in a leisure centre? Building control consultation, they have been involved a little bit. We've had a couple of conversations with them, primarily about the insulation and Part L of the building regulations. At this stage, it will be down to the main contractor to do any building control applications that are required. So we've had sort of background conversations, but nothing more detailed than that at the moment, because it's really what the main contractor's good at, and whilst I can specify things, I'm not that good at doing building control apps. Anything else on mine? No, so that sort of answered those questions. If the any observations or questions further on that?
Councillor Gill, you just wanted to come back on something, did you?
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for those answers, by the way. Just going from some notes on those. So on these pledges that you've had, I would suggest it'll be a good idea to bring written evidence of those on Thursday. Pledges for supporting the local community. My writing's a bit scrambled here. So, building control, I would suggest there's a significant cost to that on a building of that scale. A significant cost. And I think that might not be in your numbers. That'll be a significant cost. Again, that would be worth bringing back on Thursday. The asset locked company, I think that's a really comprehensive answer. Thank you for that. Might the school be the local charity that might consider being the beneficiary of that? Is there somebody like that? Because I mean that would provide assurances that the ongoing funding is staying in the community. I'm glad that you recognise that the August opening is perhaps a stretch. Given that, I think we do need to see a realistic phasing of this, and that's probably also phasing of the funding as well. If August is a stretch, do you intend to get the building wind and weather tight first, and then I think that would give us greater confidence on Thursday. And thanks for your answer about the reason why the heating would be 40 times the price in the Mears. I mean, I would just have to go away and look at that. But my final question is from Phil Knowles's comments. He basically mentions control and governance, that being public money, we would have to have some mechanism for overview and scrutiny here. Because it's public money, the funding would have to be spent according to the fair tax regulations that we've set that according to government tendering requirements. How is that process going to work? Perhaps I'm looking at both Ashley and the community group there. And then finally, the business case. I mean, a lot of this comes down to different interpretations on the business case. We have two, and they're different. Have we considered a third business case, somebody that is nearer to the kind of sales figures that you're talking about? I mean, I'm sure we'll talk again a little bit more about the business case when we talk to the officers and cabinet representatives. But from the community interest group, I know that you've done a lot of work on the business case. you'll forgive my ignorance in the leisure industry business case. It's not an industry I know particularly well. There are two at the moment. Do we need to commission a third to or get more written opinions that give members assurances that one side is more accurate than the other? Thank you.
So just to cover off the question about purchasing and procurement, I mean, clearly spending government money, spending public money, however you look at it, means that you have to procure carefully. Our intention is that any of the services that we're bringing in would be made available on framework, and have a look at anyone that's considering tendering on framework. But I think we know that the tender process can be long, the tender process can therefore be costly, and can sometimes not actually give the value for money that you require for something to be successful. Now, hold my hands in the air right now, one of the businesses that I run, and I run 3 businesses, one of them is a solar panel installation company. The price in the refurbishment, it won't surprise you to know, is what my company can do the solar panels for. That doesn't mean that that job won't go on to framework or that job won't go out to tender. It just means that that's the target figure that somebody has to beat or be able to produce better value for to actually get the job. Very, very similarly with the heating and ventilation suppliers. They have experience in the leisure industry. As I say, they've done some work up at North Highcombe. Their price, I believe, is the best available, but that doesn't mean that once it's popped onto framework, and we've got approved membership of one of the framework organisations, doesn't mean that there won't be a better price come in. But the truth of the matter is, probably the one that we'll need to do some kind of fast-track tendering on is the roof, because clearly that is the priority, get the building watertight. And the price that's in there for the roof, I think would be hard to be beaten. And we all know that when people are spending public money, they can find ways to shortcut and approve contracts. And it might be we'll have to find something different to avoid framework for the roof. But that's possibly the only one.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to go back to Ashley's presentation at the beginning, if I may, briefly, because I think he actually did himself a disservice in the Deepings councillors, who only showed it was the tip of the iceberg. For many, many years, we've been battling to get originally raising concerns about the lack of maintenance. So it really all started, and I appreciate that's at the heart, in many respects, of where we are today. So thank you for all the work you've done on behalf of your community and all the work that you've done now to try and to represent your people, and to when you look at the comments that have made, especially the most disadvantaged who can't get anywhere else. It's all right travelling 12 miles if you can, but if you can't, then you've lost the service completely. But what I'd like to just do is look at, if I may, there's a few questions I've got. It's partly around governance, partly just practicals. Whilst there's a lot of focus on getting everything up and running, I've learnt something from what's happened in Wyndham Park with the tennis courts, where we've handed over to a third party to actually do the provision of the service. And it's actually things like up daily, who are the staff there, how are things going to be controlled? Once it's up and running, what governance will there be over that? For example, the fees that are set, accessibility, things like that. Can you explain that side of things, please? Because I appreciate now our focus is getting it up, but once it's up, the much longer journey is what happens thereafter. So what control will the CIC have, or SK, given it's public money we're asking for, over any of that? You mentioned the roof, and that was an area of concern I had, but I thank you for the answers around that, because I think that's answered a lot of them. But do we have, are we up against the clock have we got a critical time frame? I think it's important we understand that, where a decision absolutely has to be made now. Or Councillor Gill touched on, I think Councillor Knowles as well, and I know myself have considered, is there a third way? There might be, but do we actually have time to do it? So I appreciate understanding where we actually are there. We mentioned the parish council interest. It was picked up in the independent report that there aren't any figures yet from the parish council. So I'd appreciate you just saying, even anecdotally, what feedback of support have you had from the parish councils regarding your project, and what support might they give to it? And it's, as we know, has caused issues with Leisure SK. Can you clarify what the position would be around VAT for your new organisation, the CIC, once you move forward, and any funds that you raise, any income that you have? Because, as I said, as we know, it's caused issues with Leisure SK. Thank you.
If it's okay, I'll answer the last question first, and I'll let Virginia give you the rest of the answers. Even though it's a CIC, even though that means it's a not-for-profit organisation, the vast majority of its business activities are VATable, and therefore VAT liability will be there within any of the sales it does. The only exemptions are when the business activity is directly related to education. So, for example, schools' use of the swimming pool should be non-VATable. However, a swim club using the swimming pool is VATable. Is that okay?
Just about the sort of governance. We've got various, with our partners, there's various ways we can go with our leisure centre partners. We can do it as an actual partnership. So both of us are involved in everything. We can do it on a management fee basis, where all the bills come to us, all the money comes into us, and we just pay them a flat fee. We quite like the partnership agreement, because the company which is offering the partnership basis is also a not-for-profit, and part of their agreement is that any profit we make will go into a sinking fund towards future repairs and stuff like that. Their option, and something which we'd like with any partner we have, is a monthly meeting, because what we don't want to do is just hand over our responsibility. We still want to be involved. We still want to know the direction of travel that they're taking. We still want some control over the fees that are charged, because it's no point us wanting to sell swimming at, say, you know, £5 a dip, if they immediately turn around and say, well, actually, we're going to, now you've got it built and this, that and the other, we're going to charge £10 a dip. No, that's not happening. It's not acceptable. So we will have, as it were, a seat on the board. So that's as regards to governance, because there's no intention that the building itself should ever form part of a partnership or anything like that. The building will always remain as a community asset. So it doesn't matter who's looking after it, who's running it. The CIC will retain the building as a community asset until such time as we have to give up, or we hand it over to the school, or the sky falls in and squashes it, whichever comes first. What else did you ask about? Oh, actual costs from parish councils. We haven't got the actual amounts. What we did was we went out to the closest parish councils, and I believe our chap that does the money raising knows better than me. I just go and talk. I think we asked for a donation of £3.50 per resident for the outlying councils that aren't actually part of SKDC, we asked for £1.50 per resident, but none of these funds would be paid out until they got their new, until we got the building, or until they got their new budget money in, because some councils are precepting for it, others are not. The bigger councils, like Market Deeping and Deeping St James, they have sufficient in reserves that they can pay it whenever we need it. But we've said to all of them, look, there's no rush. We need to get the building legally transferred first. We need all the other bits to... and I know one council, we asked for £3.50 per resident, and they came back highly delighted and said, yes, we're happy to support you at £3.50 per adult. And we go, not quite what we asked for, but thank you, we'll take it. Plus, we've only seen about we've only seen about 4 councils so far. I think we've got about 10 on the list. As with a lot of other fundraising, we're just hanging back, and then we can go to them and say, yes, we've got the support of SKDC, yes, we've got the support of LCC, and it just makes them feel a lot more comfortable. A couple of councils just said, what do you want? Yeah, tell us what you want, you can have it. But not everybody's like that. We had one council that said no. I'm not going to name and shame them. And I'm still waiting to hear on Baston. So if I can put a quantity on it, I will. But all I can do is tell you what we asked for. It depends on their interpretation at their meetings. Is that everything?
Councillor Baxter, do you want to come in?
Martin dealt with the time frame. Oh.
I think I can come back on that one, and I think this afternoon and generally the clock is ticking. The county have got this building and they've got to do something with it. Either they've got to knock it down or they've got to find a way to open it up. They're the two choices. That was on the first slide, the two choices. And thank you also, by the way, for mentioning that. I could have filled several slides with the story so far, but it's quite painful, so try to summarise it quite briefly. So there is a burning platform. The county, if they want to demolish it, will want to do it during the summer holiday to reduce the amount of inconvenience to the school, which are trying to operate a school. And so the summer holiday is the time. So if you work back from the summer holiday, you've got to get the construction firms or the demolition firms in, and so they would need to be on site middle of June, and so you've got to call them and you've got to do a tender process and so working it back and it back and it back. Originally they said they wanted to make a decision before Christmas and we were going to do November. Happily it's slipped a bit, and that's enabled us to put together a much more consensual report together. But this isn't something we can put off for 6 months or a year, or go for more consultations and more iterations of the business plan, although I'm sure that the business plan could have another iteration based on comments from this. Like any business plan, it should be regenerated all the time. But you've got the current business plan and the current costs. The facts are, as far as we know, in the detail. This is what you're making the decision on, and we need to make the decision this week, or else they'll demolish it.
Thank you. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Can I just say, first of all, I am full of admiration for a man who dares to come and sit in front of us all and answer all our questions. I can imagine it is a daunting thing, and I don't know your other name, but thank you, Martin. I think you're a very brave man. The second thing I wanted to say was I think it will help with the discussion when you've left the room. So I just wanted your answer, please, Miss Moran, on this question.
This is about finance. This is about whether we can afford it. This is about all these things. But we as a council are also about people. And at the moment, what is lying in jeopardy is the leisure facilities for a great proportion of people within our SKDC group. Can I say, if this were to fall and there were to be no leisure and swimming pool for the people of Deepin, has there been any discussion with groups within SKDC as to how they will mitigate the fact that the life of the people at the Deepins will be affected by the fact that they don't have access to the same sort of facilities as many of the other people do within this district? So has it been suggested that there will be subsidised bus fares to get somewhere else, subsidised swimming, pop-up activities that can take place within your community, particularly in school holidays, stuff like that? Has there been any discussion as to how we level? This is all about levelling up. It's all the government ever talks about, is levelling up. Have we offered you any options? Have there been any discussions yet about, if this were not to happen, how the levelling up would take place? I just wondered, because you're going to leave the room, could I have your answer before we actually get into discussion? Thank you.
No, nothing whatsoever. Nothing. I think Martin said that.
If I can just slightly expand on that. I'm a parent in the Deepins. I've got two small children. One's 5, one's 8. Neither of them can get a place anywhere to learn to swim because the area is oversubscribed. Stanford pool, no chance. Bourne pool, no chance. My eldest has had school swimming lessons. He's had to go to school in his swimming kit because the school has to travel 35 minutes on a coach to Bourne for him to then quickly throw his clothes by the poolside, jump into a swimming pool for 20 minutes to be taught to swim, and then get back out again, and then go back to school, still in his swim kit, because they simply don't have the time for him to get changed. Yeah, because that's the only way they can get him to and from the swimming pool within the time allotted for the school to actually do swimming. I know he's an extreme case, but that's the kind of upheaval that all the children in our area are currently having to suffer from. I had a conversation fairly recently, and it's worth considering that the swimming pool, and I know Ashley said it in his presentation, it's the only rectangle swimming pool in the area. If it's reopened, and bear in mind that the Peterborough Regional Pool is currently likely permanently closed, it will continue to be the only rectangle swimming pool in the area, the only place children can safely learn to swim. And I think one thing that the recent weather has highlighted is that there's definitely a need to swim if you live in Lincolnshire. So it's something, and I know I say that glibly, but we have more standing water in this county than most, and more unfenced standing water in this county than most. So it's really important we teach our children to swim. And this facility, in terms of swim teaching, won't just benefit the people of the Deepins. I know that's been said quite a lot, but Stamford and Bourne people need somewhere to learn to swim properly as well, and this facility will be able to provide that at the same time.
Thank you. Councillor Leadenham.
Thank you very much, Chairman. On the parish council side of things, I mean, as a parish councillor myself as well, it might be a question what Graham might have to answer, but surely it would have to go to public consultation if the parish council's giving money, because it just seems another backdoor way of SKDC giving them more money for the leisure centre. I'm on about parish councils when that's through the precepts. No, but it comes. Yeah, but what I'm saying is surely
can we just have one person talking at once, please? Councillor Kelly, would you like to come back on that at all?
I just didn't know, Robert, whether you were getting mixed up on the fact that that money comes directly from the people to the town council, does not come through SK. Yeah, the parish councils get a precept which they raise. Well, we don't do that every time we offer money for the Christmas event in the street or the summer picnic that we do in the park. We don't go for public consultation, but we do invite our people in our town, for instance, to come to every single meeting that we have of our parish council, and they can raise their voice then whenever they want to. Thank you. Councillor Baxter, did you want to?
I hesitate in case I make it even more complicated, but generally, the way that the community interest companies have approached the parish councils is to do it well ahead of their setting of a precept. Some parish councils do consult on the precepts, usually in the form of an extra meeting or an extra half an hour on the meeting for people to come and comment on what has been put in the precept. So if the parish councils have said, you've got a higher precept next year because we're planning to give some money to this project, then that's when people have an opportunity to come along and argue about it. Yeah.
Councillor Sawyer. Oh, beg your pardon. Selby. Beg your pardon.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chairman. Virginia, I'm going to call you Virginia. I don't doubt your commitment whatsoever. I take my hat off to you. I admire very much what you're doing with this project. Also, thank you to Martin for coming along today and for your commitment. Secondly, Madam Chairman, CICs, community interest companies, they work very well indeed. So I have no issue with those whatsoever. My question is in relation to this particular point. Now, Virginia, you're asking for £850,000 from South Kesteven District Council for a project of £2.2 million. Back in 2012, Madam Chairman, North Kesteven, they spent, or should I say invested, because they're investing in the health of their community, £2.85 million refurbishing their leisure centre. They did a cracking good job. And going back to a point that Virginia made earlier about the aesthetics on the outside, I mean, their leisure centre doesn't look fabulous from the outside, but on the inside, it really is nice. They did a cracking good job. And we're talking 14 years later now. And when you go in that leisure centre, it looks as good today as what it did back then. And before I ask my question, just want to make a point about the investing in the health. It shouldn't be underestimated the savings on the NHS, on good health for a community. And also, you know, for people that's got long COVID, I mean, there's a lot of people getting long COVID. The health you know, benefits of a cracking good leisure centre, you know, I know, you know, benefit greatly that group of people. My question is to Virginia is, please, what do you estimate to be the lifespan of this particular project? As I said, North Kesteven, 14 years ago, it looks as good today as what it did when they refurbished it. What sort of a long-term investment do you think this is going to be on your community, and also the benefits that it'll have long-term, please? Thank you.
If it's okay, I'll answer that because I've been the one that's really specified what we're doing. You're right, the leisure centre at North Highcombe in North Kesteven is spectacularly good when you consider it was originally the same centre as in the Deepens. They did take a slightly different approach in that they've done some extensive remodelling, hence the cost difference between what they did all that time ago and what we're looking at doing now. In terms of the fabric of what we're putting into the centre, most items are coming with a minimum 15-year life expectancy. So, for example, instead of going for a traditional way of lining a swimming pool, we're talking about putting a high-grade PVC liner in it. 15 years, no maintenance at all during those 15 years. That also has an added benefit that there's no pool downtime either, because you don't have to drain the pool to do any responsive or planned maintenance to the tiling. You know, would I tell you that an air source heat pump's going to last 15 years? I wouldn't like to say it would, but I also can't tell you it won't. And as things go along, then there will be planned replacements, repairs and renewals as the business moves forward. Ultimately, our dream would be to reclad the outside, make it look great, but that's purely going to be when it's necessary. Internally, the fixtures and fittings we're putting in are of a very high standard. We're just managing to do it in a cost-effective way.
Thank you. We're going to have to bring the questions. I know you're waiting to speak. Just one moment, Councillor Wood, because we do have Councillor Sawyer that would actually like to speak.
It's a point of information in relation to Councillor Selby's question. I don't think his figure of 2.something million is correct. Yeah, I thought it was more like 7 million, to be quite honest.
Chair, just for clarity, Sleaford Leisure Centre was 2.85 million. The Leisure Centre, the Mayor's Leisure Centre, that was 7.5 million, by the way.
Thank you. Councillor Sawyer, just a question, and then we're going to have to wrap up these questions for Councillor Moran because we've still got the officers to go as well, please.
I would like all the concerns that are raised on pages 1 to 28 to be addressed because very few of them have been so far. Thank you.
I think that forms part of the officer's report, does it, Councillor Sawyer?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, well, we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So, okay, thank you very much for coming along and telling us. If we do have any further questions, then if you'd like to sit in the members' room, then maybe we would have to call you back in. But thank you very much for coming along at the moment. Would we like to have a few minutes break, everybody? And then we'll reconvene in 10 minutes. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're back live again now. So if members have any questions to Councillors Baxter or Councillor Stokes at all, please. And Councillor Wood is the first one.
Thank you. The question to Councillor Baxter, actually. You mentioned about the support that the project's got. I wonder what evidence you've got of that support. And obviously I realise that people in the Deepings support it, but you know where I come from north of Grantham. People in my area don't support it, and I've raised it with all 6 parish councils that I've attended. So, obviously, could you give any evidence of what support the project's got for the residents of South Kesteven?
Yes, the consultation was admittedly done by the community group and via Facebook. There were 1,200 responses back, which is impressive for a consultation when you compare it to consultations on other things that SKDC consults on, including the annual budget of £12 million or so. I agree. I don't think that many people in Long Bennington are likely to join the Deepings Leisure Centre as a membership organisation. And I think similarly there will be activities that take place in Long Bennington that not many people of the Deepings would likely turn up. I think that's quite obvious. However, we are not elected just to represent our individual wards. We're elected to represent the whole district, and I think that we need to take into account the level of services that are provided in and around Grantham, in and around Long Bennington, in and around the Deepings. In Grantham, there's a town. There's quite a few private sector gyms, as well as, did you say Oceans, Choices, and there's a Mears Leisure Centre with a stadium, a splash pool, a 8-lane pool. So I would say that residents of Long Bennington, first of all, have chosen to live in a village which is some way from a settlement, but also are able to get into Newark and into Grantham. Whereas residents in Deeping, and those are the residents of Long Bennington who have transport. Residents of Deeping have been used for 50 years to having a leisure centre on their doorstep, but now, in order to get to a a competitive pool have to go to Spalding, or to get to a leisure pool have to go to Stamford, Bourne, or the other side of Peterborough. So, has anyone done a survey beyond what you've done at the parish councils of Long Bennington residents and whether or not they would appreciate a Deepings Leisure Centre? No, I don't think that anyone needs to.
Question, I'm glad you mentioned the wider district, because that was also my second question, Councillor Baxter. Obviously, we've got the leisure centre in Grantham, Bourne and Stamford. They're currently operational. They were built a considerable time ago. I mean, the Bourne one was about 35 years ago. We've got the Grantham one was 30 years ago. They all want a considerable amount of money spending of them. I'm just a bit worried. Can we afford to spend this money on the Deepings and refurbish Grantham, Mears, the Bourne and Stamford at the same time? Because we can't just ignore those. Like you said, it's a wider district, and I realise we should represent the wider district. So we need to make sure that those leisure centres don't fall into disrepair as well.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think you present a false dichotomy. So I agree that we should maintain the leisure centres we've got, and that's how we got into the mess with the Deepings in the first place. Is because it wasn't maintained properly over years. It is the oldest leisure centre in the Deepings. Yeah. In the district, the oldest leisure centre in the district. And, as you've said, other centres have been built. They are now showing signs of age. They need refurbishing. But I don't know if you know what went on this morning, but we are spending lots of money on leisure centres elsewhere in the district. We're also applying for money from government pots for other leisure centres in the district. Within the budget for next year, I believe, put me right if I'm wrong, that we've got money in the budget for a new roof at Bourne Leisure Centre. We've got plans for refurbishing parts of the Mears Leisure Centre. So we're not ignoring the other leisure centres, and it's not that £850,000 is being diverted away from Mears Leisure Centre to the Deepings. It's a standalone proposition to fund this particular community project, just as we've funded many other community projects, including we've had an example of the tennis club as an example of an organisation with which we are working. Leisure SK is an organisation with which we are working, and there are plenty of other examples. I'm in danger of starting to rant, so I'll stop there.
Councillor Turner.
I just wanted to clarify that should we commit £850,000 to the Deepings Leisure Centre project, we're not looking to send it by cheque tomorrow. There'll be further scrutiny as the money were drawn down over stages depending on what needed doing within the building. Can you clarify that for us, please?
Yes, I can. If you look at the proposal, if I can find the front page of it, page 3, item 4, turn over the page. There are 5 conditions on which the money will not be released until these 5 conditions are met. If the committee wish to add additional conditions, reasonable conditions, then I'm sure the CIC would work around it, because the CIC and the council are working towards improving leisure facilities. It's not. Yeah. Obviously, we're not going to send a cheque this afternoon.
Councillor Gill.
Sorry, I have a few questions, but I'm going to ask the obvious first question first. Where's the money coming from, and are there any minimum revenue MRP implications for this investment?
The first question, I think, is in the report. I'm sure it says the local priority reserve. I'm going to have to. Tell me which paragraph. Oh, 1.1. Great. Councillor Gill, if you've read the report as far as paragraph 1.1, you would know that
does empty out the local priorities reserve, does it? How much is in the local priorities reserve?
If I could just clarify, so in the budget papers that are in the public domain at the moment, which will be debated on the 15th, the projection for the LPR by the end of March 27 is 3.1 million. So this will be about 27% reduction beyond what's already committed in the forecast. Yeah, it's the only one remaining reserve the council now has. We're taking it from the reserve is to avoid MRP, because MRP in itself is becoming problematic for the council, so it's to avoid a further difficulty.
Did you say you had more questions, Councillor Gill? No or not? Because there are other people that would like to speak.
Yeah.
I thought you said a couple, sorry.
Other people.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sawyer.
Thank you, Chairman. Ashley, do we have attendance figures for, say, the 5 years leading up to the closure of the leisure centre, which will give us an indication of how likely, how popular it's likely to be if this proposal goes ahead?
Thank you for the question. We have some figures. The 5 years up to the closure, I think the last year is an odd year because it was during COVID. Right. Yeah. So take out the COVID. Before that, the centre was run by One Life, formerly known as Leisure Connections, I think, and we have some figures from them. I understand from speaking to officers that those figures are not bulletproof. However, it's the same kind of benchmark of standard of figures as we have for the other leisure centres. If I remember rightly, and I'll ask Karen to put me right if I'm wrong, over 200,000 footfall per year. Bear in mind that the swimming pool was inaccessible. The swimming pool and the sports hall was inaccessible to the public during the school day because the school had monopoly use on it. Despite that, the centre was the second most popular in terms of footfall across the district. So only the Mears had a higher footfall. And I think even the swim school actually may have been the top out of the lot. But over 1,000 in the swim school at any time. And when the pool can only take 20, 30 kids at a time, so to get 1,000 kids in the pool actually also pushes out members of the public. So management of the pool time is a bit of a struggle. But I'm absolutely confident that the centre will be very busy from day one. In the SLC report, I think it says the numbers assume that there will be a high take-up from day one, and it may take time to recover to the pre-COVID levels, or to recover for customers to find out that it has reopened. I can assure you that there are 10, if not 18,000 people living in the Deepings and around that are watching very, very closely. And those people who are paying out £50 a month for Bannatynes and having to drive to Spalding or stand ground on a regular basis, they'll be standing with the money on day one.
Councillor Harrison.
Sorry, Chair, I think I might have preempted it. Is this questions at the moment, not discussion, aren't we? Yeah, no.
Councillor Kelly.
Mine wasn't a question either. It was a point, a statement.
Councillor Knight.
Thank you. A few points were made earlier on about people who have supported. John Hayes, for example, was mentioned, and it occurred to me just how in one corner on a sort of, with 3 different districts around, the Deepings actually is. And the impact on South Holland Council and Peterborough Council, have they been consulted in terms of what their views would be? They were presumably benefiting, some of their leisure centres are benefiting from the Deeping Centre being closed. Could they potentially mount some sort of legal challenge, particularly given the amount of money that's coming in for the Spalding Centre? Earlier on, you mentioned that we sort of talked a little bit about alternatives. those centres, Newark and Spalding, were funded by specific big grants. Why haven't we put in any bids for specific big grants of 20 million to fund new leisure centres? To me, that seems like something that we probably should have done a long, long time. I'm guessing there is an answer to that. But and the sort of final point on this, the final question is: how far down the road did we go in terms of actually getting private companies to look at opening a centre? I'm particularly thinking of the model of what we all think of as Oceans, which is now called Choices in Grantham, whereby the monthly membership is competitive with Leisure SK, no doubt about it. They have a pool, they have the facilities, they have the core of what you want in the Deepings that's totally private. If it works for them, surely there must have been some considerable work done to try and attract a company like that to come in as a partner with the Deepings, whether it's at the existing site or a new site. Thanks.
Okay, so the first question was, what will be the impact on South Holland and Peterborough? Peterborough are struggling, as you will have seen in the news. They're struggling, and the Peterborough Regional Pool has recently shut, possibly permanently. The nearest pools to Peterborough City Centre are, I think, it was one of the questions that we asked about. In the report it talks about the other pools in Peterborough. They are not closer to the Deepings than the regional pool. So anyone who is currently going from the Deepings to the regional pool will have to go even further once the regional pool has permanently shut. The Spalding pool is, well, it's not yet built, and it's built by a massive loan. So I think it would be bizarre if a building that had been built by a massive government loan took legal action against a minnow that had received a relatively trivial loan in the scheme of things from a neighbouring local authority, because South Holland have presumably have the same corporate objectives towards health and well-being as we do. There are other providers. I mentioned one that I went to earlier on, and I don't think that they're in the same market. And when it comes to the challenge, so I don't know how much you've gone into the Bevan Britain advice, but the Bevan Britain advice says, is there a gap in the market, and is it unfair to other providers? There is no one locally, with the possible tangential exception of Leisure SK, there is no one that is able to provide school swimming or competitive swimming in a sensible radius of the Deepings. So that was the first one. The second one I'm going to skip. The third one was about... Oh no, that was the second one. Let's let Karen do the second one.
Thank you. In relation to the grants that you mentioned, those came from the Levelling Up Fund. South Kesteven is a Tier 3 authority. It's actually the government looks at levels of deprivation, and because it's deemed South Kesteven is quite an affluent district, we do miss out on those big government funding. We've recently been looking at levelling up round 3 and whether we'd qualify for that, and actually the government are not allowing any new applications, they're just reconsidering ones that weren't successful in level 2. So it's quite difficult because of the kind of like affluence of our district to receive that level of funding.
Through you, Chair, can I please ask what was the deadline for the applications that South Holland won? When was the deadline for the application for levelling up money that South Holland won?
I'm sorry, I don't have that level of information. It was levelling up round 2, which was some time ago, but I'm not that close to it.
Okay. My point was that I think it was before May, which is before the world began. What was your third question, Gareth? Can anyone remember Gareth's other question? Oh yeah, right. So what effort have we made to find a private operator to run the leisure centre? So it became, when SKDC handed the building back to LCC, it became an LCC problem. LCC went out to the open market and said, would anyone like to run this leisure centre? As far as I know, they only got the one bid in. However, the one bid they got in, the CIC, did go off to plenty of other providers. I don't need to name who they are, but went off to plenty of other and said, would you like to come into partnership with us to run this leisure centre? But at that point, any of those providers could have said, well, actually, we could do that by ourselves, much better, much cheaper. So the likes of Greenwich Leisure or Northampton Leisure or One Life or any of these people that exist, they had every opportunity to bid at the same time and chose not to. And as I said earlier, I would guess that's partly to do with the context of the site, which is slightly more complicated than having a big building on the bypass. Does that answer the question?
Is that okay? Councillor Knight? Okay. Councillor Fellows.
Oh, right. I've gone on and off that at least 3 times in the last 2 minutes. Basically, my question is this, Ashley. I can totally understand why the CIC formed, and I can totally understand and be very supportive of where they are now. Was there at any point, certainly since May, where there was a consideration that there could be some sort of partnership, however small, with SKDC? Potentially a seat on the board of the CIC, or even because in essence you're asking, a private company is asking us for a loan, which, putting another hat on, is in direct competition with the way we deliver leisure across SKDC. Now, as a model, I've no problem with it, but I can't help but feeling, because of the way our feelings may be going, was there any way that SKDC, even at this time, could be conjoined in some way to the CIC to make this whole process far more palatable to all of us?
I'm not going to answer this by myself, but as you know, the way that SKDC delivers leisure services is in a period of transition at the moment, or in a period of turmoil, you could say. And so if you were the CIC, would you have gone, knowing what you would have known, would you have gone knocking at the door of SKDC saying, could you please help us reopen this leisure centre? Or would you have explored the other options? And then if you're on the side of Leisure SK and SKDC, I think they would have more pressing matters to worry about than reopening the centre. I don't know if I'm being unfair to officers, so I'm happy for officers to join in, really.
I totally understand where you're coming from, and obviously, as I was one of the councillors who went round the leisure centre when they first suggested it was closed and could not see a single reason to close it, and the building report on the roof said it was not structurally unsafe. We are where we are, but because of the way I feel SKDC is moving, I do have that optimism of moving together. So that's where I'm coming from. I can understand why the CRC are where they are, but again, I'm useless with money. My wife won't even let me out of the house with any in my pocket, which is why don't ask me to buy you a pint. But now, for me, it's simple. The CIC wants this money. What do we get in return, apart from obviously excellent leisure service and a provision of a service that we actually want? But in hard terms cash, if you'd gone to a bank for the money, they'd want interest. If you'd gone to private investors, they'd want something. Is there anything there apart from the brilliant service it's going to offer that is potential at this point?
The request is for a one-off funding for the refurbishment and reopening of the leisure centre. If you or the committee want to add something else on that would complement that, then let us know what it is. But I don't really understand the question. I don't think. If you're talking about a seat on the board or something like that, I don't know how that would work either, because.
I think you've answered it, Councillor. Thank you.
Have you? Good.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. And as I say, I was not certain about how I was phrasing the question. I knew where I was coming from. Obviously, I've confused yourself. If I confuse other members, I apologise. But there may be something in what I've said that may make them think as well. Thank you.
Mr. Wiles wanted to interject. did you?
No, I just took issue with some of the comments around suggesting the council is ineffective running leisure. As you know, they're run by Leisure SK, which is an independent company, not officers of this council. And just to clarify, you've already clarified, it's not a loan that's been asked, it's a grant, which is one-off funding contribution.
Thanks a lot. Totally answers the question.
Councillor Johnson.
I just wanted to say that when the decision to close Deeping Leisure Centre was made, it was a terrible decision for us all. And I don't normally speak very much in council things, but I spoke first. I think everybody that was on the council at that time didn't want to do it, but it was because of funding. And you're back to the same thing now. I mean, I think it's a great thing that they want to open it, and I can't think for 1 minute how much time and effort's gone into putting all this together. But we have 3 leisure centres of our own. And I was just looking to try and find the figures. I think we're only 79%, if I remember rightly, Karen can perhaps tell us better, up to where we were pre-COVID. So if Deeping opens, which, I mean, to me, the work that's gone into it, that's fine. We will end up with a leisure centre of our own perhaps closing, because they will go back to where they were. And I think one of them said that we've got more swim schools, and if the swim schools go down and go back to Deeping, then we're back to a scenario where another leisure centre might have to close within SKDC. So there's that to look into as well. And they all need money spending on them. All 3 need money spending on them. And what we're getting is, whatever you want to call it, is a drop in the ocean, because they're getting old. I think it was a crying shame that it got to the state it was. And perhaps with hindsight, some of the Deeping councillors that have stood up to be counted now to do it should have perhaps noticed that it was going downhill as fast as it was and brought it to our attention sooner. But as Paul says, we are where we are, so we need to consider everything that's in the melting pot.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you for the comment. I disagree with it. I hope you weren't including me in the list of councillors from the Deepings that should have stood up early, because it's on the record that one of the earliest meetings I'm on the record for, that in 2010 I was at the Deeping Leisure Centre Forum complaining about the maintenance at the Deeping Leisure Centre. Okay, but certainly people in the Deepings, councillors past and present, have been complaining about maintenance of leisure. As Councillor Stokes, formerly Mr Stokes, can testify, there are plenty of people, past and present, who have been complaining about the maintenance, not just for Deepings Leisure Centre, but also the other centres around the district.
I'll just come back on that. I've been a councillor for 4 years, and until the Deepings came to be perhaps closing, I never heard anything. I didn't even know it was in a bad state. But having said that, we are where we are now, Ashley, and we've got to move forward.
Fine. As for the bit about, again, you're saying that it's a choice between a one-off forever contribution to the Deepings Leisure Centre or the ongoing costs of the centres in the rest of the district, which for many people in the Deepings are inaccessible. Over the last 2 years, I think, assuming that the budget requests are met, Leisure SK has had funding requests over the last, within a 2-year period, well over £1 million, and that's in addition to the management fee that they already get. So you're all good free market conservatives. The market should decide how the things work. The other centres in the district are getting a big subsidy from the public sector in order to operate. Why are you afraid of another operator in the district providing more access to leisure services? I would have thought that was a healthy, competitive environment. And goodness knows, the Leisure SK is struggling to deliver services now. So I don't think we can start blaming the future prospects of Leisure SK on a centre that hasn't even been reopened yet.
Thank you. Can I just pick up on a point with you, Councillor Johnson, there? There are numerous people in the Deepings, obviously I come from the Deepings, where they cannot afford to travel to Bourne or Stamford. They haven't got the transport and they can't afford to travel. So what we can't measure is how many children and adults in the Deepings that can't actually use a leisure facility because they're not putting their names on a waiting list. So those people, if the Deepings Leisure Centre opened up again, would be able to use that. So that would be a group of people who would instantly use the leisure centre and wouldn't necessarily take that away from the Bourne or Stamford facilities. So it's just immeasurable, you know, for the amount of people. And because the Deepings are growing so rapidly with houses and how many children are coming into that area, then I actually don't think that would make such a big difference for the Stamford and Bourne leisure centres from that perspective. So that's just my opinion. Sorry. Okay, thank you. Next person to speak is Councillor Gill.
Thank you. Okay, so three questions. Just to follow up on Councillor Gloria Johnson's point there. We are where we are. With Leisure SK, officers are working hard to turn that, to get that business back to pre-COVID levels, and a lot of work's going into there. So I think we should recognise that a huge amount of effort's going into Leisure SK. There are areas where we'd want to see improvement, but there's a lot of good work happening there. This will have an impact on Leisure SK, a council-owned. The guidance from the officers, 3.5 plus, suggests it will have a significantly negative impact. There was a report several years ago saying, a market study saying that the district can only support 2 leisure centres, one in the north and one in the south. So I suppose, again, just refining Councillor Johnson's question here, can you give us some assurance that we're not voting on the closure of Stamford Leisure Centre and Bourne Leisure Centre, which is something that's been repeated in previous market analysis reports, as well as the kind of suggestions here? So I'd like to understand that. I'd like to understand what that would do for minimum revenue provisions. Moving on, the legal advice. Thanks for your comments on the legal advice. I've got to say, it's not crystal clear to me, though. I mean, I would want a much more crystal clear piece of legal advice from a law firm that's backed up by legal indemnity insurance that we're not breaking the law here. And that's fine. I think, by the way, I think your comments were very good, actually, but you're not a lawyer and I'm not a lawyer. You don't have legal indemnity insurance. I don't have legal indemnity insurance. And why isn't that clearer? Why isn't that clearer? Did Brevin Britain not want to be clear? I mean, that's perhaps a question for the solicitor, but that should be far clearer for me. I want to delegate that decision. There are no lawyers in here with legal indemnity insurance that can give me the insurance that we're not breaking the law here. Although I thought that your answer earlier on was comforting, but I would prefer a lawyer to give me that advice on the record, so that I could go after them if it was wrong. And my third question is to the leader. I mean, the Cabinet member Paul Stokes obviously does believe this is a viable business plan, and there are some great elements to it. It should be said that even the community group said that there were issues with the business plan and that their timetable was inaccurate and that they needed work to do on that. I was really pleased that they recognised that there was more work to be done on some key things like the timetable for opening. I was really pleased that they were realistic on that. I think that was encouraging that they're realistic about that. But I want to understand from the leader as well whether he shares the enthusiasm for the viability of the business plan of Councillor Stokes, who appeared to be more who appeared to be more enthusiastic about it than even the community group, who said that there are challenges and they were realistic about it, and so I really welcome their comments. So. Yeah, and I suppose my final question, fourth question, is, and this is to Ashley, because I know that he's been working with the community group a lot on this. If the business plan is so good, if it is such a no-brainer, and there's so much demand in the local area, which there is, why don't we have a huge queue of people at the door wanting to open this leisure centre for us? Perhaps he's touched on that earlier on, but I don't understand why people aren't falling over themselves to back this. Why is it coming to us for the grantor of last resort? Thank you.
Okay, so the last question, when you say, sorry, through you, Chair, a queue of people at the door saying we want a leisure centre, or a queue of people at the door saying we want to run a leisure centre? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's because they're all recovering from COVID. Maybe it's because, as I've said at least twice, the context of the site is slightly problematic. There are only, I think, 2 other gyms in the Deepings, the Teddy Bear one up on the top and the Empire Gym in the centre, and they are much smaller operations. Maybe it's the problems of I'm sure if it was a refurbished building, you'd have people queuing out the door to run it. But the project of taking on you can see the cost of refurbishment about £2 million, to say, right, £2 million plus you're working with local government, then a business owner looking at managing a wet gym in the Deepings or anywhere else, I think they're going to look at their other options first. But I'm not a leisure industry person, I'm just someone that wants to deliver. So the first question that you asked was, are we voting to close the other leisure centres? No, we're not. We're voting to increase the provision of leisure centres in the Deepings, and if competition is a good idea, then having a close neighbour to compare notes with in terms of turnover and staff and membership and so on, it should make the leisure SK offering a bit sharper and a bit more conscious of someone leaning over their shoulder saying, oh, we're doing it for £32, so Leisure SK better do it for £31 or however the system works. So no, of course you're not voting to close other centres, and also we've said that we're going to get a lot of visitor economy creep from from South Holland and from Peterborough, and people are not going to drive from like my daughter used to swim with a girl that came across from in Peterborough and packed up with the swimming club because the journey from Thorney to Stamford at 6 o'clock in the morning was unpalatable, whereas the journey from to Deepings was just about managing. So no, but the other half of that is, as a local authority, our job is not to try and keep leisure centres open. We're not trying to make Leisure SK a sustainable business, although we are, but the reason we want Leisure SK to be a sustainable business is because we want people across the district to have opportunities to lose weight, get fit, get healthy, meet communities and improve their mental health. That's the point of running a leisure centre, and to me it doesn't matter whether it's Leisure SK or the national government or LCC or a community interest group. We want people to have better access to facilities. I'm ranting again, sorry. The legal advice, this is new legislation, it's emerging legislation. I think it only went through the House at the end of 2022, so the case law on it is very thin. Bev and Britain have done their best to gather what available case law there is. If you go on the government website, you can see a list of subsidised organisations that are on the government subsidy list. That's what Miss Moran was referring to. It includes £1.5 million to Neen Park Trust, which is in Peterborough, so Peterborough have given £1.5 million to a leisure provider of some sort. And then there are lots of others. I haven't gone through them in detail, but there is a system in place, and as I understand the advice, we say to the world, we're giving this grant to this organisation, and this is because the market need is not met. So there is a gap in the market, it needs fixing, so we're putting in £850,000 to fix the gap in the market. That goes on a website for about a month, in which time everybody else who thinks they're meeting that need within the marketplace can say, hold on a minute, that's not fair, you're making the marketplace unfair, you're unbalancing the marketplace, and they have an opportunity to appeal. That's in a nutshell how I think it works. I welcome input. Yeah, if you could, please.
Thank you. Just to answer Councillor Gill's specific point, so we've had lots of conversation with Bevan Britton, and I think they've been really clear that they can only offer and show us the advice, the legal position. It's for this council to assess whether the subsidy is lawful and whether it has enough information to withstand a legal challenge. So you'll notice at the moment the subsidy assessment template is in draft, and the preamble to exempt Appendix 2 provides some information from Bevan Britton, and it's their advice that should the council be minded to provide the subsidy, that more evidence is given, because their advice is at the minute the template that we've done, the assessment that we've done, would not be significant enough to withstand a challenge. So actually they're saying we need to go back and visit that post the decision, if that decision is made.
The remaining question was to the leader, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Geel, it's not the role of this scrutiny committee to scrutinise the difference in enthusiasm that might or might not exist between myself and the Cabinet Member for Leisure and Culture. I would, however, say that, as leader of this council, I am, of course, enthusiastic for anything which supports us meeting the corporate objectives of this council for culture and leisure. Thank you.
Councillor Harrison.
Are we into chatting now and discussion? Okay, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to express a disappointment that Councillor Wood called into account Miss Moran's commitment with the rather banal comment about a pound contribution. And I wonder, in hindsight, whether he'd care to apologise to her in that. I found that very disappointing. Moving on from that, I'll give Councillor Wood a chance to respond after this. Let's look at this whole thing. Does anyone think a leisure centre is a bad idea? I doubt it very much. So let's cut this to the nuts and bolts. Are we going to have our ratepayers contribute $850,000 and have quite possibly a leisure centre to show for it? Or are we going to have them pay possibly double to demolish it and have nothing definitely to show for it? A previous administration was happy to pay 10 million, well 20 million at one point, then it was down to 10 million, on something we are now being led to believe isn't viable. What's changed? Why is it not viable now, but it was viable then? I'm concerned on that sort of rhetoric on it. A quick look at the local government website shows a Commission Sport England report, the value of sport and physical activity. 85.5 billion is the annual contribution community sport makes to the economic benefits. 72 billion in social value is created through healthier population, consumer expenditure, greater work productivity, etc. 9.5 billion is the value of physical activity makes to the economy through the prevention of several serious physical and mental health conditions, including the prevention of 900,000 cases of diabetes and 93,000 cases of dementia. 20 billion in value is created from stronger and safer communities, including 10,000 fewer crime incidents. I can't see anywhere at all that this is not a viable situation for us to have for our district. Bringing another leisure, or not bringing a new leisure centre actually, we're refurbishing a leisure centre that's already there. To let this go and be demolished, I think would be a sin, and I personally could not go back and face my constituents and say that I was voting against this. I'm sorry.
Thank you. I think Karen
would
like to come back to that.
Chairman, can I respond to those comments?
Could you just wait one moment, Councillor Wood? Karen would like to come back on that, if you don't mind, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a point of clarification from Councillor Tim Harrison's statement just now. So should there be any cost in relation to demolition, it would not be for this council. The building is owned by the county council, so we would not make a contribution to that.
That's not actually what I said. It's the same ratepayers. It's the same people will be paying it through a different. They pay their rates. 75% of it goes to council, and 25% comes in. So either way, they're paying it. And I'm not happy in telling them that you're going to pay twice as much to definitely have nothing, as pay half as much and possibly have a good chance of having something that will offer all those benefits I just mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wood, would you like to?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Harrison, for giving me the opportunity to explain. No, I wasn't challenging or criticising Councillor Moran's commitment. What I was saying, the fact that they've only started this company up and put £1 in isn't a good commitment to it. It doesn't show a good commitment to the public. So yeah, I know Councillor Moran, they've put a lot of commitment in, and they put a lot of work into it. But by creating a company, to me, and only showing they've got a £1 liability doesn't show a good commitment to the public. That's what I was trying to get at. If I've got questions, do you want me to continue if you've got other people in front of me, Madam Chair?
I've got other people in front of you,
okay.
Councillor Wood. Yes, if you'd like to come back, Councillor Harrison.
I'd just like to see what Councillor Wood's understanding of the companies and putting the £1 contribution is in. It's a standard thing. It's not indicative of your contribution to what you want to do. So that's why I was asking whether he wanted to apologise. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarity there. Councillor Bisnasling.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Coming to a more positive note, I would say, I think our SKDC's promotion of a healthy community is at the heart of this situation where we are here. I fully agree. We have got a building that is safe, well, and sound that with a bit of refurbishment can be brought back into use. So I think for 850,000, that's a very minimal sum. That's a very, I really have got great respect for the people that put all that there, given the time for it to put a very good, viable proposal, not totally 100% there, but it thinks it's work in progress. It can advance forward. What I would like to say, as was mentioned by the presentation earlier by Councillor Virginia Moran, that he mentioned that once the CIC got the money, got the funding sort of in place, this refurbishment is going to be refurbished, will hand over to a what you call a management company for running the leisure part of it. That's right. What I would like to know, is it possible, are the leisure, the management company of the leisure, they are, I believe, they are fully experienced in running leisure facilities. Have they had any input in the in the business plan, or will they be involved after the handover? Are they, because we would like to see the business company, so what they are, the materials they have got to work with, how they can make it more profitable and go forward.
Thank you. It's probably a question that would have been better directed to the CIC. However, it is my understanding that the CIC, and it's in the paperwork, that the CIC are working, are required by LCC to find a leisure centre, a leisure provider to work alongside. Currently, they have 3 or 4 potential leisure providers who wish to work with them. They haven't made a final choice as to which of the 3 or 4 they're going to work with because, A, they haven't got the money yet, and B, they want to keep the options open. And so if this is approved by the council, then they will go back to those 4 providers and say, give us your best offer in terms of content, quality, commission to run our leisure. Give us a pitch in the same way as the council would if we were. If it comes to us looking for another provider of any services, we will go and we'll have a cost and quality tender for the best provider. So when it opens, yes, it will have a experienced leisure provider running it on behalf of the community interest company. The role of a community interest company will be to protect the community interest, to make sure it doesn't turn into an unaffordable white elephant. And the organisations which they're involved in they're running leisure centres all around the country. They've all, 3 or 4 of them, got track records of running them properly. What isn't in the paperwork, and which has been asked for repeatedly by the officers, is the community interest company have run their numbers through those leisure providers, and the leisure providers, we are told, all say that the numbers, the business plan numbers, are realistic. In fact, they are conservative. We as leisure providers would expect higher figures, but the CIC, for obvious reasons, have erred on the side of caution. But even though they've run those numbers through the leisure providers haven't gone as far as saying, you can put our logo on that piece of paper that says it's a... Yeah, because why would they? Why would they give their commercial expertise to a scrutineer of a third party for nothing? But it's not guaranteed to run it anyway. It's,
Page 25, 2.75, 2.76. Page 25.
oh yeah, page 25, 2.75, 2.76. Yeah, so paragraph F, leisure management providers.
Thank you for that, Ashley. I'm conscious now that we are past the 3-hour point of the meeting, and we would therefore need to take a vote to continue this discussion. So, do I have a proposer that would? Okay, Councillor Wood, and a seconder, Councillor Harrison. So, can we have all those in favour that we carry on? Sorry, could we just keep our hands raised? Sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yes. Did we get 13 or 14? 14. Okay. Any against? 1. And any abstentions? 2. So that's carried. Okay. Sorry, we were just discussing as to how long we would carry on, and the suggestion is that we will carry on for another half an hour, if that's acceptable. Okay, sorry about that. So, the next person to speak is Councillor Stokes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to talk about the numbers that you eloquently described and put to bed, really. I don't believe that the numbers at Bourne or Stamford would be massively affected. I think there's only a very small percentage from Deeping, as you said. There's more and a much bigger percentage that don't travel anywhere because they can't swim at the moment because they've nowhere to go. So I think it's a small percentage, and I think if our leisure provider gets their act together, they could fill the spaces that are left with local swimmers. So I think that's very important. The figures in the business plan, and I can tell from my time, as Councillor Baxter said, as Mr Stokes, I know that the figures are more than reasonable. I suspect that they can be well beaten. I think those figures, and I think any provider, when they saw those, if they thought they were too high, would have immediately said these are not figures that we could even contemplate a bid on.
Thank you. Mr Wiles, I think you'd like to come back on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that point. It's been mentioned a few times about the business plan. I just wanted to clarify that as officers, we had raised concerns throughout our meetings with the CIC about the acceleration of those income profiles, because they're not in line with what we're seeing with our leisure centres through Leisure SK, and they're not what's being seen by the industry post-COVID. And that's been independently validated by SLC, who have been brought in. I think somebody mentioned earlier about 3 sets of eyes, if you like, to scrutinise it. That has been done. The CIC have presented their position, the officers have raised their position on it, and SLC have independently taken their position on it. So we have, throughout this, raised concerns about the levels of expenditure that are being put into the business plan and the levels of income and the acceleration of those income levels, because there doesn't appear to be much of a lag in growing that. And I know Councillor Baxter has demonstrated through the business community, through the community in that area, as to why that lag won't be as apparent as you'd expect to see in a new business. However, those concerns that we've raised still prevail. When we put this position to the CIC, they came back and said, yes, but we've got third parties who would potentially be interested, who actually say that these projections are pessimistic and indeed these are prudent numbers. When we asked to see those to validate their position, they declined to present that information, either because the bidders haven't gone to that level of detail, or they felt it's commercially confidential and therefore were unwilling to share it. But it would have given us some reassurance that those income and expenditure projections are validated and have got some level of evidence against it. The reason that's so important, for those that have looked at the business plan, is because it needs to demonstrate a solvent position from day one, and the reason it needs to do that is because it wants to build up a sinking fund in order to invest and reinvest into that centre. If those projections are out of step with the market, insofar as the expenditure levels exceed their projections and the income doesn't achieve those targets, then literally from the start of the refurbishment and opening process, that centre is going to be into a deficit position, which I would imagine would be very challenging to recover. And for whatever the comments have been made about the 3 centres, then clearly the industry is demonstrating it is very difficult at the moment in the market to make these a viable business proposal. That's why, as officers, I know we haven't had much chance to articulate our position on it. That's why we're urging caution when we're presenting this information, because it is very sensitive and very volatile to inaccuracies in those projections, which very easily tip it into a loss-making venture. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you for that. Next person to talk is Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. I found myself with a real dilemma here. I think, first of all, I'd like to actually disagree with Councillor Baxter about one thing about the role of local authorities. I believe it is our duty, and in fact the Local Government Association agree with me, that is our duty actually to provide and sustain services, public services. And the leisure amenities, that has been argued by a number of people today, are hugely important for a number of reasons: well-being, physical health, impact on our NHS. I think that's a really good point. Thank you, Councillor Selby. So I think there is an awful lot stacked up for us to continue providing services. I'd like, as a now former member of Leisure SK, I would like to make one point, having sat on the board for a while this year. I believe that Leisure SK was actually improving performance this year. I think it's important we recognise that. The hard-working officers on the ground were improving performance. The issues actually that caught out Leisure SK, I touched on it earlier, were the VAT and the national insurance contribution calculations. Now, the VAT is actually really important, and we've had confirmation today will affect the CIC, because basically the more the better you do, the more sales you make, the more you've got to pay out. And I think it was something that had been, wasn't always the case, and the rules around VAT changed a few years ago, and that's what largely has caught out Leisure SK and us as a council. So I think a lot of the issues within Leisure SK aren't around its management as such, although there's clearly an error there on the figures front. The miscalculating the VAT that would be due. But I think it's more around the structural constraints of having a business within our council running our leisure services. I think that there is an opportunity to reflect on that and whether that is the best way for us moving forward. To some extent, the same thing also applies to the Deepings Leisure Centre. I raised a concern or mentioned the Wyndham Park tennis what's happened there with the tennis club, because although the council gained a lump sum of £50,000 to renovate the court, in reality the fees for the users have gone up from £0 to about £28 a game, and it's very difficult now for children to just turn up after school, for example, and play. So there's pros and cons to the decisions that we make. My feeling is there are a number of questions around the presentation before us and the structure of it. I think I fully understand where Councillor Baxter's coming from. The history of what's happening with the leisure centre clearly has caused a significant lack of faith by the local community and the representative members in SK in continuing supporting their leisure centre. I fully understand that. I think it would have been, and this is where Councillor Fellows, I think, was coming from, and I'd support, I think it would have been an ideal solution, really, would be to step back with a fresh look at this and say, how could we work in partnership and move forward to protect the services which, at the end of the day, we are being asked to pay for a considerable amount to our community. So we had, as a council, more of a stake. I really feel that would have been a much better option. But it sounds like, from what we're saying, that there are time constraints around this. We don't want to go back to the drawing board. I have a feeling there'd be a rebellion in the Deepings now, actually, if we did suggest potentially such a thing. So we are where we are. So I have to look at this from a different perspective. And I think there's a moral argument here. We're talking about £800,000 and handing that to the community and trusting them to run their facility. Why have we got the £800,000 to spend in the first place? Well, we know we're short of money. But the real truth is, because, harsh as it may be, for over a decade, and if not 15 years and more, this council has failed that community. We failed to put what was needed in that leisure centre to keep it running properly year on year. So we've ended up with an accumulation of issues on the site, and we've ended up equally accumulation of funding that SK otherwise should have spent, which is actually the same issue we've got at Wyndham Tennis Park, because the council then actually had a duty to maintain that court and failed to do it. So that's why we ended up going cap in hand to the Lawn Tennis Association. We're in a very similar, there's a pattern of failure of this council in the past, which the current administration have inherited, I hate to say, but it's true, and somehow have to move forward on. So my feeling is, I don't think this is perfect, this plan before us, but actually I feel morally we have a duty to support that community, and I would ask that we do actually support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person is Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Thank you. Could I ask where I'm on the list, Madam Chairman? Okay. No, I made it for him. No, I haven't.
Sorry, Councillor Wood did put his hand up a long time ago. Do beg your pardon.
That's fine. Yeah, we're making a lot of references today to Leisure SK, and obviously this morning there were certain events happened that some people in the room might not be aware of, to do with the leader's statement and what actually happened in the committee meeting. And it might actually just sharpen minds a little bit if people understood what that leader's statement said and in regard to Leisure SK and where we are at the moment. So I think it'd be worthwhile if someone just gave a quick recap of what that statement was.
I'm not sure who that person would be, and if it's appropriate to this meeting. I would have to ask Mr. Watts.
Yeah.
Let's ask Graham.
Sorry?
Just need to make sure it's...
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Chair, if you sure?
Sorry, Graham, could we have some clarity on what...
There was two things really at the committee this morning. There was a statement that the leader read out in relation to some commitments that he and Cabinet will be undertaking in relation to the issue under consideration. And then there was a recommendation from the committee in relation to a vote of no confidence in relation to the Board of Directors for Leisure SK Limited. So I don't know which of those you wanted to highlight, but I don't have the document in front of me, but I don't know if the leader still has a copy which he may wish to read out.
I have a copy of the statement in front of me on my laptop, which I'm happy to read out, but obviously this is for information only. It's obviously not for debate, because this is not what's being scrutinised here at this meeting. It's not on the agenda for scrutiny, but as a point of information for all members, because this was said in the public domain, there's no reason why I wouldn't repeat it now. As it was said in the public domain, it remains in the public domain. I'm happy to do so if the meeting wishes me to do so. Thank you.
Yes, please, then, Councillor Cleaver.
Okay. So, statement by the leader to the Leader of the Council to the Culture and Leisure Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 9th of January 2024. So in relation to the request that was noted in the papers for that meeting, it was noted that there was an additional shortfall in the current year over and above what had already been reported of £273,000 additional for Leisure SK Limited that was asked for as funding to see it through the current year. And that's the background. In response to that, the statement I made is as follows: that at the earliest opportunity, the Deputy Leader and I will ask Cabinet in the short term to request officers to write to Leisure SK Limited to request a mitigation and recovery plan for the financial years 23-24 and 24-25 in response to the management fee request, with a view to seeking the level of management fee being requested reducing further for 24-25. To request that the Cabinet Member for Finance and Cabinet Member for Leisure receive regular, detailed budget forecast reports from Leisure SK Limited between now and the end of the financial year 23-24. To request an urgent independent assessment of the business plan and profit and loss account for the financial years 23-24 and 24-25 and propose any corrective action or mitigations that can be undertaken. To initiate an independent assessment of the existing governance model and operational financial management controls to ensure that they are fit for purpose and effective, to note that an independent review of the VAT and taxation implications is already underway, and to ask the Council's S151, Section 151 officer to undertake a review of the financial information, a review of the board minutes and level of financial support being provided to Leisure SK Limited, and to recommend to Cabinet any corrective actions that may be required. And in the medium term, accelerate the options appraisal for the future delivery model of SKDC's leisure services, including insourcing and full market testing by tender with leisure providers. This to be undertaken within the shortest of timelines. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next person to talk is Councillor Wood.
I'm sorry, Madam Chairman, if I appeared impatient. But well, as you might have gathered, I can't support the giving of this money to CIC. I just think there's too many uncertainties. I've got 6 main concerns which I will read out. I mean, the first one is I think there's too many risks on viability and leading to possible project failure. And one of the main ones which I pointed out before is the cost of the project. I don't think it stacks up. I just don't think that 2.2 million is enough to deliver a good leisure centre. That's the first one. The second one is I'm not reassured that the subsidy control conditions that we've talked about before will be met. There's too much uncertainty about them. The third one is I do think, and we spoke about this before, the impact on Bourne, Stamford and the Deepings leisure centres. And I know there's been comments made about they won't suffer. I know Councillor Baxter says there's enough money, but I think that money, rather than the 850,000 given there, would be better spent on the existing leisure centres to make them in better position. The fourth one is the impact on SKDC's budget generally. I know where the money will be taken from. That's the budget reserve, and I know, as it was pointed out, that's in paragraph 1.1. It's coming out, that reserve, the local priorities reserve. But you can't keep taking money out reserves. You can only spend money out reserves once. And so I think we're putting ourselves in a vulnerable position and shouldn't take it out of there. The next one is that I'm a little bit worried about as well. My next concern or question is I don't think any accounts really been taken of future possible demolition costs if the whole thing goes belly up and doesn't work. And that could probably cost, I don't know, £1 million, or was it 1.2 million somebody mentioned? My last concern really is the reputational damage by going along with this. I mean, I know some people have said that it'd be silly not to go along with it. I think it'd be silly to go along with it. And I think there's a greater damage for SKDC if we do go along with it and give this £850,000 to this group to run it, which is contrary to we've got leisure services run our own services, right, giving it to a competitor. So those are my main concerns, and that's why I'm not in favour of it and can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Now, we still have quite a few people who want to talk, and we really only have 10 or 15 minutes. So the next person to 5 minutes. It was 20 past. We said half an hour. No. It was 20 past when we voted. That gave half an hour.
We're working to that clock, Councillor.
It's the same one. Okay, so the next person to speak is Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First, I just wanted to say that I appreciate all the people in the room have great concerns about the finance here, and I think we do really need to be very careful about the checks and the balances we make as we give out the money that is provided by the taxpayers of South Kesteven District Council, and we assign it to projects. What I think is most important as we go forward is, and I'd like a record made of this please, that I think our HR and governance should be checking every time we give this out. So, for instance, there were examples given of other events that have happened within SK, and the same checks and balances should apply to those organisations as we are suggesting apply to this CIC at this time. That was my first point. My second one was that since July 2021, Deepings has had no leisure services, and I'm guessing from the question I asked Miss Moran that they have received no compensation for the fact that they are not getting the same consideration as other areas of SKDC that do have leisure centres. If we don't support them having any leisure facilities in Deeping, I would really like to know the suggestions from everyone else in the room is what we're going to do about it. Are we just going to forget them and say, tough, you haven't got anything? Or what are we actually going to do if we don't go forward with this? Because I think, as was mentioned earlier by others, there's a moral obligation in here. They are paying their council tax like everyone else, so they deserve services such as everyone else can have. So I'd like some answers.
Thank you. I think you have a very good point there, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Bird.
Hello. Yes, thank you. I think the members of the committee have received my submission, which sort of puts my position very much that if we tick all the boxes, then there's no reason why we shouldn't go ahead with it. So I'd obviously be very much in favour of supporting. What I am slightly concerned about that doesn't seem to have been raised in the discussion is the time frame has been raised, but from my reading of all the papers, there are possibly 4 legal agreements that need to be negotiated and signed off in order to make any progress at all. And I'm just concerned a little that we've only got a couple of months really to get all these legal situations fully negotiated and signed off. There appears to be the situation with the DFE, that there's some work there. There's a legal arrangement over the transfer with the LCC, some sort of legal agreement with the Anthem Trust. There's probably a legal agreement with, assuming SKDC forwards the money. And there's obviously a tender process and legal contracting with an operating company. So I'm just wanting to raise the practicalities. And I know sometimes legal stuff can take not just months, but longer. And I just wonder how we can help to progress the matter with, it's not just one legal transfer. There are several that all need to be tied up together so that everybody is in agreement that things can progress as planned. Thank you.
Would you like to come back on that?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much for the questions. I might not have explained the situation with regard to the burning platform properly. The County Council intends to find a resolution to the issue of the Deepens Leisure Centre this year. If the resolution is to demolish, then they want to get on with demolishing over the summer holidays. If they have got commitment, or if they've got a viable business plan from the CIC ahead of that, then they won't need to demolish. But in the same way, they won't need to see the building start. They just need the commitment that something's going to happen. And the decision by this council this week either makes it viable or makes it extremely difficult. The 4 agreements, I completely agree. Once you get the lawyers involved, as we've said, the situation can become vague and expensive and difficult. But the situation with the DFE, which I think is the real stumbling block and has been for the last 13, 14 years, I believe that they will want to move on it. And when we've sat down with John Hayes over many, many months, we've said, your job, Sir John Hayes, is to sort out the DFE. And at the time, he said, I'm very good friends with Nick Gibb, the schools minister, and I'm sure that I can persuade him to put it to the top of the pile. Sadly, well, I don't have an opinion on it, but sadly from our point of view, that Nick Gibb is gone from schools minister and we're now a different schools minister. So John Hayes has said that it doesn't matter who's sitting in that particular chair, he will do his best to expedite it if it means that we can move it forward. For transfer of ownership as well, I think perhaps that's less problematic because the County Council is used to transferring properties from one ownership to another. But once you get, as I've said before, once you get government, local or national, involved, everything slows down, and the other two. But if we make a decision today to support the community bid, or today and Thursday to support the community bid, that is a stay of execution from the demolition and hopefully the birth of a new organisation. But if we decide this week not to be involved, then that makes it extremely difficult to survive.
Thank you.
Sorry, could I just come back very quickly on just very quickly. I think the other point about the length of it that it might take for the legal agreements is that until all the legal agreements are sorted, that delays the start of the project, which potentially puts the price of the project up. So that was my other part of the discussion.
Councillor Sawyer.
Thank you, Chairman. I came here this afternoon and my inclination was to vote against the proposal, and there I am admitting to be a naughty boy for displaying a degree of predetermination, which I know is absolutely forbidden. However, having listened to everything that's been said since 2 o'clock, I am wavering in that intention. But there's one sticking point, and it's the one I've mentioned twice already. I do want to see the concerns raised in the officer's report addressed individually, and I'd be a lot happier if they could be. How we find time for that, I honestly don't know. We obviously don't have time today. I doubt very much we'll have time later in the week, but I really would like to see them addressed. I think they're all valid concerns, and they should be properly dealt with.
Thank you. Do you want to come back on that, either Ashley or Richard?
I think, as I tried to explain previously, the lens in which we've looked at this and the lens in which the CIC have looked at it are different, and that's not unexpected. There may be some optimism bias in their very glass half full projections. Ours are slightly more pessimistic, but we've taken it from a position of what's happening in the industry, both nationally and regionally, and we're not convinced that the acceleration of income, and I'll go back to that point, is realistic given the evidence we've got from the sources we've used. Now, the CIC have taken a different set of evidence and a different body of information and come forward with their projections. We're not convinced their fees and charges will drive the customers back to that centre compared to other competitors in that same location. We're not convinced that the cost for the fit-out will bring forward a viable, attractive offer sitting alongside the marketplace and other competitors. Already mentioned, and we've raised the same concerns, that fit-out cost doesn't, for us, appear realistic or will provide the wow factor, as it was described by the CIC, that will drive the customers back literally from day one. And Councillor Baxter has articulated a different view, where there is a high degree of evidence that they will come back on day one. Come back to the point. The reason this is so important is the viability of that scheme is either success or failure on day one, and the recovery of that position will just be more difficult the longer that journey carries on. We've also tried, through our discussions, to get the CIC to demonstrate to us if they can only do partial refurbishment, what does that do to their business plan? So if they can only offer certain activities within the centre because they have run out of money to do the whole refurbishment, that will compromise the viability of the business plan, and they'll have a high degree of fixed costs because they'll have to. The utilities will run across the whole centre, but the income projections will only be in certain parts of it. We were unable to, or the CIC, to be fair, didn't want to pursue that argument, so they said to us it's an all or nothing as far as they're concerned. The £2 million will put the investment in, and they'll be able to deliver the offer. I'm not convinced by that. I think that is a serious concern for us. But that's why we, between ourselves and the Cabinet members, we came up with a number of conditions to ensure that the taxpayers' money that if supported goes into this venture only gets released when we've got more reassurances and more evidence that there is more contingency built into it. We've got evidence that the procurement activities they want to do are market tested and will hold up to a level of scrutiny. So basically there's a gateway process to ensure that at the only point in which we release funding, we've got as much governance and protection in place as we possibly can to ultimately protect the taxpayer. It's been said before that it's the taxpayers' money, and rightly so. So we're doing the best we can to ensure that you make a safe decision, but that money is protected to the best of our ability. But at the end of the day, there is a moral position on this, as has been said multiple times, and there is a forensic financial position on it. And those two, unfortunately, are not going to be in a perfect scenario for this one.
So,
sorry, can I just say we are now at 10 to 6, and we agreed to go half an hour over. I have 2 people on my list that still wanted to talk, and so we're at a predicament now whether or not we take a vote, whether we take this forward to council, or whether we allow the 2 people to talk that are on my list here till 6 o'clock. Can we have a vote on everybody that wants to take it to 6? 1, 2, 4, 11. Those against? And abstentions? That's carried. Councillor Crawford.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and I apologise now if I've missed this in the report. I think some of it Richard has just answered. You have £500,000 aside in case of anything comes up while refurbishing. But what reserves do you have in case you do not get the people through the door and to keep it going until you do? Thank you.
It's not me that's presenting this business plan, it's the CIC. I think when you're planning a business, you can only go on the available evidence, and so that's why I put on there under risks. What if nobody ever wants to go swimming again? Based on the previous activity at the centre and the current activity in the market and the advice that's been given by officers and the third-party operators and so on, the business plan, we are told, is a set of conservative numbers about what's going to happen. There is always a risk that it might not work. There is also a risk that it might exceed all expectations and be the new model for running leisure centres across the district. Richard, quite rightly, as his role is glass half empty, I'm quite happy to put the case for glass half full, but we neither of us know. I would like to draw your attention, Chair and Committee, to leisureopportunities.co.uk, news from the leisure industry, from 2nd of December 2023, so that's barely a month ago. Pure Gym ramps up expansion after strong quarterly results. I knew to Google Pure Gym because they were on Radio 4 on New Year's Day saying they're increasing their promotion of rolling out new gyms. And the last paragraph of the news article says, speaking in this month's HCM, the Managing Director said the company is working on making the affordable model work in smaller locations and eyeing expansion into rural areas. We've found a viable model with an addressable population of 30 to 40,000. We're working to become viable at 1,500 members, and if we can make this work, it would give the teams the ability to meet their target, and so on. So they're not knocking at the door, I'm afraid, of the county council to do it. I'm just saying that when we hear people saying that the leisure industry is still on its knees and hasn't recovered from COVID and so on, that's not the whole of the leisure industry. There isn't any money at all at the moment, other than what they raised at the jumble sale on the school fee. Yeah.
Councillor Knight, sorry.
Thank you. Just to drag this back down to this meeting, I'm not entirely sure whether or not we're even heading towards a vote, whether we're just discussing it, but I do think that As things stand right now, I'm a little confused as to why anyone would be 100% for or 100% against. I think there are a couple of unanswered questions that hopefully the community group will come back to us with answers to before Thursday, particularly around some of the cost elements, unknown things about insurance, building costs. Councillor Gill asked some questions that were way over my head, but they sounded important. I think that as things stand right now, we're not. I don't think anyone can really say they can be 100% confident on the figures at the moment, but I do think there is a path there for the community group. I don't think that this is out of the question. I do think they need to tighten up a little bit of the nuts and bolts of some of what they're saying, and if they do that, I do think that there is a strong case to be made. So hopefully in the next 48 hours they'll be re-watching all these questions. Maybe we have Councillor Gill's questions on repeat a few times to get their heads around them. I do think there's a path there, and then once again, thank you to the community group and Ashley as well for answering all the questions for the best part of 4 hours. I think it's been very thorough. Thank you.
Thank you. There is no doubt that a lot of work has gone into this, both from the officers and the community group, and I think we have to say thank you to all of them, because there has been an awful lot of paperwork provided to us. It may not be exactly what we need or what we want, but it certainly has given us a good insight as to what is being provided, possibly, but also the detail that the officers need to know as well. At this point, the purpose of the report was to provide a recommendation to Council on a request for one-off funding which has been received from Deepings Community Leisure Centre, CIC, in the sum of £850,000. And the recommendations were review the business plan submitted by Deepings Community Leisure Centre, CIC, review the level of the capital costs projected relating to the refurbishment of the Deepings Leisure Centre, review the income and expenditure projections for Deeping Leisure Centre and give consideration to a level of funding subject to all the following conditions, of which there are 5. Any funds would only be released after the statutory period for a potential challenge in accordance with the Subsidy Control Act 2022 has expired. Confirmation that the other major funding contributions set out in the business plan have been committed and approved by those contributors. A satisfactory undertaking of due diligence of the Deepings Community Leisure Centre, CIC, including a review of their financial regulations. Evidence that proposed refurbishment works will comply with building regulations. Completion of transfer of lease or freehold ownership of the site from LCC to the Deepings Community Leisure Centre, CIC. I know there are a couple more questions that Councillor Gill posed and asked them to bring the answers back to full council. I think there was a couple, is that correct? I remember at least 2, or I think you said. So
I think after 4 hours in here, I think that there's probably more than 2. But yeah, I mean, I just echo Councillor Knight's point. I think there's more information needed for us to take a sensible vote on this recommendation. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so Councillor Harrison is proposing, and second for that proposal is that we take it forward to full council. Councillor Noon. So can we have a vote, please? Just one moment, please.
Madam Chairman, can we have a recorded vote, please?
Just one moment. We've been asked if we can have a recorded vote. Sorry, Graham, could you just explain, please?
So yes, we need, based on the membership of this committee, we need 4 councillors to indicate that they would like a recorded vote, and that would be sufficient for us to hold a recorded vote.
Are we accepting the proposal in principle that we support it? For expanding further information available until Thursday.
Chairman, if it might help, I think what's been proposed is this committee makes a recommendation to full council to provide one-off funding to the Deepings Community Leisure Centre CIC in the sum of £850,000 based on the conditions set out in paragraph 4 of the recommendations and subject to additional information as requested in the questioning of this committee throughout the meeting. I think that's the proposal that's being voted upon. And if 4 councillors indicate, then we will undertake a recorded vote, which I believe we have, Chairman, so it will be a recorded vote.
Councillor Gill, have you got a question? Are you talking about the extra information?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that what we're voting on, I mean, gosh, after 4 hours, I daren't ask this question, but what further information are we requesting? Because, as I say, I don't feel as if I'm in a position to vote here, because there are definitely provided good answers to some of our concerns. And there are other things where the community group has said they'll go away, and there are areas where the officer, Councillor Sawyer said that he would respond. He would expect some guidance upon some of the officer concerns. So I don't feel we're in a position where we can vote, because if pushed, as I say, I think that we don't have the information. We've done 4 hours of scrutiny, but we've created some information that needs to come back to us. We're going to be back in this room for another 4 hours on Thursday. I would urge the committee to dare I say it, go back and watch this for 4 hours and find out what questions need to be answered on Thursday. I don't think that this committee can sensibly recommend or indeed reject what's been put in front of us at the moment.
Just for a moment, can we just have one person talking at once, please? Graham, I understand we've had a proposal and we had a seconder, and we then asked for recorded votes. So where do we stand now in the sense of what Councillor Gill is stating? Do we go to the vote?
So, Chairman, I think, again, just to reiterate the proposal, I understand the proposal is the recommendation to Council for £850,000, subject to the conditions set out in paragraph 4 of the report. There's probably a bit of a question mark as to any points of clarity that have been requested from the CIC. I'm sure that they will undertake to review the questions that they've received today and provide any further information. So I'm wondering if Councillor Harrison wants to take that aspect off the proposal, so it is solely a recommendation to full council for £850,000, subject to the conditions set out in paragraph 4 of the report. So that is what is being voted upon. Is that clear?
Is that understood? Is that clarified for? Yes? Okay. Is that okay?
Yep. So okay. On that basis then, a recorded vote, I'll call your name in alphabetical order. If you could indicate whether you are for, against or abstaining in relation to the proposal that's been put. So I'll start with Councillor Emma Baker. For. Councillor Visnalthing. For. Councillor Crawford. Against. Councillor Fellows. For. Councillor Gadd. For. Councillor Harrison. Councillor Gill. Councillor Johnson. Against. Councillor Kelly. For. Councillor Knight. Against. Councillor Leadenham. Against. Councillor Lay. For. Councillor Martin. Against. Councillor Noon. For. Councillor Sandal. Against. Councillor Sawyer. Against. Councillor Turner. For. Councillor Wood. That is a tie, 9 votes against, 9 votes in favour, so that it is a casting vote for the chairman. So the chairman has indicated the casting vote is for, so that motion is carried.
Thank you, everybody. It's been